I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401 New Discovery. How is your injury? Li Ming asked behind him while walking. Tanjing seemed not good at speaking and even felt that what Li Ming said was a bit offensive. She glanced at Li Ming with an impatient expression but did not speak. Li Ming did not care that the other party was indifferent, but he could check her physical condition through his wisdom eyes, so he did not care. After his eyes casually swept over her body, Li Ming continued to walk in front, but Li Ming thought in his heart, although the tumor has been removed, there is still some poison energy in the body. She can only use her own energy to remove it little by little. Thinking of this, Li Ming's footsteps suddenly stopped and looked up. Tanjing was the same. Although she did not have Li Ming's strong mental power, she could still sense the situation in front of her very clearly. Not far in front of Li Ming was a damaged spaceship, which had been abandoned for a long time, like a long scrapped car. The spaceship was not big, round, only a dozen meters long and wide, with many holes on the surface, and some places were broken. No energy could be sensed on the spaceship. As for how long it had been abandoned, Li Ming had no idea. The spaceship was stuck between two huge rocks, and the bottom was not connected to the ground, like a bridge between the two rocks. Li Ming looked at it with his eyes, paused for a few seconds, and then continued to walk. With the sound of rustling footsteps, Li Ming and Tanjing gradually came to the bottom of the spaceship. They raised their heads slightly and looked at the abandoned spaceship above their heads. They did not stop, but just looked up with their eyes. But as soon as their eyes left the spaceship, a pop sounded in their ears. The sound was like a ball of sticky liquid falling from above. Li Ming was startled when he heard the sound, and his head turned slightly. He looked at the ground, where the sound came from. In the blur, he saw that the ground beside him was wet, which was a ball of unknown liquid. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and frowned slightly, and looked up at the spaceship again. The dark sky and the dilapidated spaceship. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, but he did not see anything unusual in the spaceship above. Looking at the wet ground, Li Ming's eyes turned slightly. Although he felt a little strange, he did not say much. He turned slightly and continued to walk away. Tanjing also just took a rough look, but his expression revealed a little strangeness. Although both of them felt strange, they did not find anything unusual. After walking forward for a while, Li Ming could already see the edge of a huge pit. When he was in space before, Li Ming found many pits on the surface of the planet, and the edge of the huge pit he saw now was one of them. Looking ahead, Li Ming slowed down his pace, raised his left hand slightly, and a green light shadow flashed in his palm. A small green dragon had emerged, and then he gently waved it, and the green dragon turned into green light and shot out. In order to ensure safety, Li Ming decided to use the green dragon to see what was going on. With Qinglang sensing in front, Li Ming was relieved. After moving forward for a while, through Qinglang's sensing, Li Ming could see the situation at the edge of the giant pit very clearly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The edge of the giant pit was not formed by meteorite impact like the alien planets encountered before. This one seemed to have collapsed, or been dug by humans, but not far from the edge. Another thing was also sensed by Qinglang. The appearance of this thing made Li Ming frown again, and his eyes turned to look in that direction. At this time, Qinglang had already flown over the place. This place was located in front of Li Ming's right, also on the edge of the giant pit. A giant spaceship was lying quietly on the ground. This spaceship was also damaged, and the degree of damage was similar to the one seen before, but some energy could still be sensed inside the spaceship. According to the exact location sensed by the flying dragon, the energy came from the main cabin of the spaceship. Li Ming paused slightly as he looked in the direction of the spaceship, with a look of hesitation in his eyes. Tanjing didn't understand why, but she also looked in the same direction. However, Tanjing didn't have Li Ming's wisdom ability, so she couldn't see anything except darkness. Li Ming turned and walked towards the giant spaceship. Although Tanjing felt strange, she could only follow Li Ming. As they got closer, the spaceship became more and more obvious. the entire huge spaceship landed on a pile of rocks, as if the spaceship had suddenly fallen, and some rocks were even embedded in it. Although the spaceship looked abandoned for a long time, the energy inside was not completely exhausted. The only energy made the broken spaceship flash from time to time. After reaching the bottom of the spaceship, Li Ming looked up and didn't do much, but let Fi Long enter the interior of the spaceship. Fi Long was in a phantom state, not subject to any physical restrictions, and came to the main cabin in just a flash. The main cabin was in a mess, without any alien figure. Sometimes you could see a large area of unknown liquid and the remains of unknown creatures on the ground, as if there had been a fierce fight in this main cabin. The only place with light in the entire cabin was the operating table, but the light was weak, just like there was a lack of electricity. Fi Long approached little by little until he stopped above the operating table in the main cabin. Fi Long had the same ability as Li Ming's wisdom eyes. As soon as he approached the operating table, the information recorded on it emerged little by little. Those recorded information also attracted Li Ming's attention, just like a video recorded by a camera was played in it, and Fi Long was instantly brought into it by the picture. The record of the operating table successfully restored the situation when the spacecraft re-entered the planet. When the spacecraft arrived at this wandering planet again, it also received a friendly invitation message, which was similar to the information received by Li Ming's spacecraft, and then the spacecraft entered the planet. It was just that the spacecraft was attacked violently as soon as it was transmitted to the sky above this area. Through the records, Li Ming found that the attackers of the spacecraft were not aliens, but alien creatures, the Zerg. There are two types of Zerg that launch the attack. One is a flying insect from the air, and the other is a crawling insect from the ground. The alien insects in the air are like beetles, black in color, nearly round, 2 meters long and wide, with a small head, 2 long antennae, a pointed mouth, and green eyes. Although they seem to be small in size, they will rush up in groups once they launch an attack. These flying alien insects have two ways of attacking. One is to spray corrosive liquid from a distance, and the other is to bite and attack after approaching the spacecraft. The alien insects on the ground are of various forms. Some are like grasshoppers. Although they cannot fly, they have strong jumping ability. Facing a spacecraft more than 10 meters high, they can also easily jump up. Their body size is larger than that of the air, reaching 5 or 6 meters each. There are also some ground alien insects that are clumsy, but larger in size, more than 10 meters long, with a hard shell on the surface, and can also spray various attack liquids. Various attacks are no less than the energy cannon attacks of civilized creatures, and even more than that. In just a moment, the spacecraft has been riddled with holes, and the surface is covered with a large number of alien insects. Under such an attack, the spacecraft has no time to do anything before it is already shaky. The alien Zerg on the surface of the spaceship were also extremely fierce. After a few bites, they tore a hole in the surface of the spaceship, and then the alien Zerg jumped in from the hole. The aliens in the spaceship could only fight back, but the alien Zerg never intended to kill them. They just subdued them one by one, until they had no resistance. The spaceship finally fell to the ground because of exhaustion, and the aliens inside were all subdued one by one. Even though a large number of alien Zerg were killed, the battle ended quickly. After the battle, the aliens were taken to the surface of the spaceship by the alien Zerg, and were suppressed on the surface of the spaceship like prisoners, motionless. After a few seconds, a large number of alien Zerg on the ground retreated to both sides, making a way, like a group of soldiers lining up for their leader. Although the alien Zerg were disorganized, such actions showed that some powerful person was about to appear. Sure enough, a giant white and green alien insect appeared. The alien insect looked like a garlic, with soft flesh, but no eyes or mouth, only 4 small holes on its body, like nostrils. It was 5 or 6 meters tall, 7 or 8 meters wide, with no limbs visible, and only its body could be seen moving a little bit. As soon as the alien insect appeared, the other alien insects around it crowded away, and retreated far away, as if they were extremely afraid. But the most eye-catching thing was that this alien insect that looked like garlic had a soft and long thing on its head, like a tube, and on the top was something like a morning glory. These were all parts of the alien insect's body. As the alien insect walked, the object on its head swayed back and forth, and the Morning Glory-like organization seemed to be inspecting. Wherever the Morning Glory was aimed at, the alien insects in that area would shrink and retreat, as if they were very afraid. Chapter 402, Zerg Siege. The alien insects quickly came to the side of the spaceship and crawled along the rocks to the top of the spaceship. Looking at the subdued aliens, the 4 nostrils of the alien insects kept spewing gas, and the aliens lying on the ground were trembling with fear. At this time, one of the small alien insects suddenly loosened its claws and let go of an alien. Without the restraints, the alien was also shocked and looked around. With confused eyes, he stood up little by little, but before he could do anything, the white-green alien insect suddenly moved, and the Morning Glory on its head flew out. The Morning Glory was like a big mouth, wrapping the alien in an instant. Then, the whole Morning Glory flickered faintly, like a hazy lamp. After a few seconds, the Morning Glory suddenly opened and spit out a corpse with a puff. The action just now was to completely absorb the soul of this alien. And that action was like a person eating a jujube and finally spitting out the core. After doing all this, the beast shook its body in satisfaction, as if giving some orders. Seeing this action, the alien insects that controlled the aliens took the aliens in their hands away from here and flew far away. The white-green alien insect was not in a hurry to leave. The Morning Glory on its head shook for a while and then slowly sank down, aiming at a small broken hole on the top of the spacecraft. Then a thin thread came out from the center of the Morning Glory. This thin thread was like a tongue, stretching into the interior of the spacecraft little by little, until it reached the main cabin inside the spacecraft. The thin thread went directly to the position of the operating table, just like a human finger, aiming at the operating table and lightly tapping it, and an order was immediately issued. The command received by the operating table was to continuously send designated information to the space near the planet. The content of those messages was the information that Li Ming's spacecraft had received before, such as friendly and welcome. After doing this, the white-green alien insect took back the green silk, and then left this place with the mighty Zerg army. All of the above contents were seen by Li Ming on the operating table through the flying dragon. As the images of these contents reappeared, Li Ming's face suddenly became ugly. His expression was like a layer of frost, cold and stiff, bloodless, and his eyes were even filled with anger. He whispered fiercely, "This is a trap." As he said this, Li Ming turned around quickly, glanced at Tanjing beside him, and said, "Let's go, get out of here." Tanjing looked confused and had no idea what was going on, but she could clearly sense that Li Ming must have noticed something dangerous. Not daring to hesitate, after taking another look at the spaceship, she quickly followed Li Ming and walked back the way they came. Before the two had walked far, Li Ming's hurried steps suddenly stopped. His eyes widened a little, his face gloomy, and he raised his hand to block Tanjing. Tanjing still didn't notice anything, but seeing Li Ming's tense expression, she understood that the situation might be very dangerous. Sure enough, after a few seconds, various rustling sounds began to appear in her ears, and in the dark distance, a large number of unidentified objects had appeared in the outlines walking towards this side. The sound surrounded him from front to back, from left to right, and all around him. Li Ming's eyes moved around, carefully observing his surroundings. Tanjing also became nervous at this time, and kept looking at the place where the sound came from. The sound was getting closer and closer, and the shadows were getting clearer and clearer. Li Ming's slightly narrowed eyes had entered a state of fighting at any time, and Tanjing could also clearly see the creatures approaching him at this time. Tanjing's eyes were fierce, and his brows were slightly furrowed. Li Ming was serious, and he opened his mouth slightly and burst out 2 words, "Alien insects." As soon as the 2 words came out, a piercing insect sound of R entered his ears. This sound was like the horn of the Zerg's charge. In an instant, the alien insects around rushed over. Li Ming's eyebrows tightened, and the palm of his right hand flashed with blue light, as if he was holding a blue ball of light in his palm, and white arcs jumped in his left hand. Without waiting for the alien insects to get close, Li Ming leaned over and slapped the ground with his right hand. The palm did not directly touch the ground, but the blue light ball in the hand was quickly injected into the ground. At the same time, with a wave of the left hand, a white arc flashed out. There was a sound of kai kai cha cha, and the white arc spread out in a chain. In just a moment, all the surrounding alien insects were connected by the arc. The arc was the electromagnetic wave chain released by Li Ming. And what Li Ming slapped into the ground with his right hand was his new ability, energy control. Although this ability has not been cultivated to the extreme, it can control various elements around him at will. Suddenly, the sand around Li Ming's body began to bulge from the ground little by little, as if something was about to drill out of the sand. The surrounding sand also gathered towards the bulge little by little, as if the sand was piling up something. After a few seconds, 2-meter-high sand giants gradually appeared. These giants formed by the gathering of sand were completely controlled by Li Ming's energy. There were more than a dozen of them at a time. Each giant held a sharp blade and rushed towards the alien insect as soon as it appeared. Looking at the sand giant entering the battlefield, Li Ming showed a satisfied look. Then he clenched his left hand hard, and a flash of lightning flashed and exploded, and the alien insects connected by the lightning were instantly shattered. At this time, Li Ming slowly stood up. The action just now wiped out all the alien insects close to him, and even the alien insects in the distance were blocked by the sand giant. After doing this, Li Ming grabbed Tanjing and prepared to float away, but at this moment, a ball of yellow liquid sprayed out from the alien insect swarm in the distance, and then fell down in a parabolic arc across the sky, hitting Li Ming. Without time to think about it, Li Ming waved his right hand, and a golden barrier quickly emerged in the air in front of him. With a light sound of snap, the yellow liquid hit the golden barrier. It was like a pool of mud hitting the glass. It was unclear what this yellow liquid was. It was seen that it slowly slid down from the golden magic shield barrier and fell to the ground. There was a swarm of alien insects below, and the yellow liquid immediately fell into the swarm of alien insects. With a hissing sound, all the alien insects that touched the liquid melted into a pool of blood and disappeared in an instant. When Li Ming saw this scene, his face suddenly became ugly and his eyes widened a little. Not only Li Ming, but also Tanjing was stunned, and they couldn't believe the power of the yellow liquid. This corrosiveness was extraordinary, and it would disappear almost as soon as it was touched. Watching this scene, a large amount of yellow liquid began to appear in the alien insect swarm in the distance, just like there were many parabolic cars in the distance, and pools of yellow liquid kept flying towards this side. These liquids did not all come to Li Ming, and some directly hit the sand giant. Under the strong corrosive force, even the sand giant would be directly shattered and fell to the ground, which made Li Ming dare not underestimate it. With a wave of his left hand, he set up a magic shield golden light barrier, like a golden ball to hold himself and Tanjing in it. Although the attack of the yellow liquid was temporarily blocked, this was obviously not a solution. The orderly attack of the alien insects made Li Ming worried. Because from the surface, the attack of these alien insects was orderly. There were bouncing alien insects in front of them attacking at close range, and giant beetles spraying corrosive liquid in the distance. This arrangement like a troop was almost the same as civilized creatures. Even if the bouncing alien insects in front were killed in large numbers, the bouncing alien insects in the distance could directly jump from the periphery into the middle of the battlefield to replenish the dead alien insects. This made the giant alien insects spraying yellow liquid and Li Ming maintain a certain safe distance. The powerful corrosive liquid continued to erode Li Ming's magic shield, which was not only a consumption of energy, but also a consumption of psychology. Li Ming's worries had not been eliminated yet, and the sound of buzzing came from the sky again, and a large number of black flying beetles came immediately. The alien insects on the ground had not been resolved, and the alien insects in the sky flew again, which made Li Ming's face suddenly change. There is no doubt that this situation has made Li Ming more passive. At this time, Tanjing turned his head slightly and glanced at Li Ming beside him, with anger and helplessness in his eyes. With Tanjing's original strength, he naturally didn't have to be afraid, but now Tanjing still had poison energy, so his fighting power was not as good as before. Chapter 403, Take advantage of the scheme. What should I do? Tanjing was a little nervous. Li Ming's eyes narrowed, and his right hand slowly raised up. Suddenly, a ball of blue light appeared in his palm. The blue light was not static, but it was spinning rapidly in the palm, like a small tornado. Looking at the blue whirlwind in his hand, Li Ming suddenly swung it hard. the blue light tornado fell to the ground. At the moment, when the halo whirlwind landed, a huge tornado was formed. In an instant, the sand and dust around turned with the wind direction, and the objects around were being drawn into it little by little. As the wind force increased, not only the sand, but also the alien insects were brought into it little by little. A huge sand and dust tornado has been formed. Li Ming stood in the center of the entire tornado, with his right hand raised high. Blue beams of light spread out from his palm one by one. The beam lines pulled the tornado like ropes and rotated rapidly. The storm was getting bigger and bigger, and sand and dust mixed with alien insects were constantly being drawn into it. Even though there were many alien insects around, they were not spared under the strong suction of the wind and sand. Under the urging of Li Ming's powerful energy, the tornado soared into the sky. At this time, the wind force was extraordinary and the volume was huge. The diameter of the entire tornado was more than 300 meters, and all the alien insects nearby were sucked into it. Rocks and the damaged giant spaceship were also sucked into it. If it was a normal naturally formed tornado, these objects might be sucked in and thrown away, but Li Ming used energy to urge it differently. Once they were sucked in, they would be infinitely torn by the wind force inside, hit by rocks, and rubbed by sand and dust. At this time, Tanjing, who was standing in the center of the tornado, couldn't help but look up and look around. It felt as if he was in a closed space, and the surroundings were like rotating walls. However, these walls were mixed with some messy things, including rocks, spaceship wreckage, and alien insect limbs. The sky was dark and the earth was dark, which was shocking. This magnificent scene also shocked Tanjing. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and observed through his spiritual power. He found that the alien insects around him had basically been sucked into the tornado, and there were no longer any that could pose a threat to him. Seeing this, Li Ming was slightly relieved, and his right hand loosened slightly. Just like letting go of something that was originally tightly grasped, the wind suddenly decreased, and those larger and heavier rocks or other objects were thrown out first. Then all kinds of debris began to fall. The bodies of alien insects, sand, debris, etc., flew all over the sky, and Li Ming and Tanjing had already flown into the air. He swept his eyes around and saw a mess of dust. He turned around and flew towards his spaceship. But when Li Ming was about to leave, there was a sudden buzzing sound in his head, as if countless thorns were piercing his brain. The pain was self-evident, but fortunately Li Ming had the defense of wisdom, and his body only trembled slightly in the air, and nothing unusual happened. But Tanjing beside Li Ming was not so lucky. He fell down and fainted without making any sound. Seeing Tanjing falling down, Li Ming reached out to grab her, but as soon as he was distracted, his head started buzzing again. In extreme pain, Li Ming had to give up trying to save Tanjing and focus on resisting the severe pain in his head. Tanjing's body fell straight to the ground, but before it landed, a flying insect suddenly flashed by, and its claws directly grabbed Tanjing and flew away. Li Ming saw all this. His eyes narrowed slightly, his face showed anger, and a ball of blue flames instantly burned from his body. At the same time, he moved and went straight to the flying beast. The blue flames were the ability of Li Ming's wisdom eyes, and the severe pain in his head was the consciousness being attacked by external consciousness. The passive ability of the wisdom eye had the ability to actively defend against attacks from other consciousnesses, but Li Ming could only use the active ability to defend now, and the passive ability was useless against that attack. Obviously, the being that attacked Li Ming's consciousness must be a guy with extremely strong mental power. While using the Cyan Phantom to defend, he quickly flew to chase the flying alien insect. Before he could chase far, another alien insect flew not far behind Li Ming. Li Ming naturally noticed it in advance. He looked behind him and frowned. The alien insect behind him was not here to attack him, but to capture him. There was only one order in his mind, which was to take Li Ming and Tanjing back, as if the person who gave the order was very sure that no one could resist its mental attack. Moreover, it was definitely unrealistic to send only one flying insect to attack Li Ming. From the consciousness of this flying insect, Li Ming naturally felt its purpose. Looking at Tanjing, who was getting farther and farther away, Li Ming's flying speed was naturally not as fast as that of the flying alien insect. On this dark planet, the distance of consciousness exploration was not as good as that of the eyes of the alien insect. The eyeballs moved slightly in his eyes, and Li Ming seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the flying insects behind him again, and then closed his eyes. His flying body paused, and all energy was stopped. His whole body fell straight to the ground like a plane that suddenly lost power. The green shadow on his body also disappeared, like a corpse. Before Li Ming landed, the flying insect behind him pounced on him, hooked Li Ming with its claws, and flew away quickly. Li Ming pretended to faint, but his consciousness was still active. He couldn't catch up with the flying insect that took Tanjing away, so he might as well sneak in to see what was going on. The flying insect didn't fly far with Li Ming. It circled in the air and entered the huge pit. The place where Li Ming released the tornado before was already at the edge of the pit, so the flying insect came to the inside of the pit. After flying for a while, the inside of the pit was a series of black wells, which Li Ming had noticed in space before, and this flying insect brought Li Ming directly into it. At this time, Li Ming's eyes were slightly closed. Everything was sensed by consciousness, and Tanjing had long disappeared from Li Ming's conscious sensing range. As for whether Tanjing was sent here like Li Ming had no way of knowing. The wells were of different sizes. The one Li Ming was brought into was 100 meters long and wide, with an unknown depth. He only felt that he was falling, but the interior of the well still surprised Li Ming. Through the induction of spiritual consciousness, Li Ming discovered that the interior of this well was not really vertical like a well. Some places would suddenly become very wide, and some places would suddenly become very narrow, and the walls of the well were not completely flat. It was as if the surroundings were corroded, with pits and potholes, deep and shallow. After more than 10 seconds, Li Ming felt that his body was no longer falling, but moving in parallel. This was not the bottom of the well, but it was already far away from the ground. After flying parallel for a short distance, they came to a huge space. This was the inside of a cave, which was completely closed, and several kilometers long and wide. The ground in this space was a series of raised hills, like a volcano, and each mountain pass was constantly flashing red light, which was very strange. These hills were not high or big, each of which was only about 5 or 6 meters high, but there were many of them densely packed in this space. After the alien insect flew over one of the hills, it threw Li Ming down casually. Li Ming fell into the mountain pass that was flashing red light like discarded debris, and after seeing Li Ming fall into it, the flying insect turned around and flew away. Before Li Ming landed on the ground, he suddenly opened his eyes and floated in the air. Then he returned to a standing position, first looking at the mountain pass above his head, then at the 4 walls, and his eyes kept looking around. At this time, Li Ming had already mastered the structure of the hill. The 4 walls of the hill were all pale yellow stones, which flashed a faint light. The reason why the mountain pass was red was that the rocks at the mountain pass were different from those inside the hill, as if they were built by humans. The entire mountain was like a wine bottle, with a big belly and a small mouth. After reading all this, Li Ming finally looked down and looked at the bottom of his feet, which was the bottom of the hill. After just a rough look, Li Ming couldn't help but frown slightly. The bottom of the hill was not a rocky ground, but a black vortex, like a black pool, but the black vortex was not liquid, which was strange. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, looked down intently, and took a deep breath with a hiss sound. The breath between his eyebrows became more solemn, and whispered, "Dark matter." According to Li Ming's perception, the black vortex inside the bottom of the hill was dark matter, a substance containing dark energy. Chapter 404, Blending In. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and stared at the matter below, while his body fell down little by little. In Li Ming's cognition, dark matter contains dark energy, which is a kind of energy opposite to light energy, but most of this matter exists in the universe. The last time Li Ming obtained dark energy was also on a wandering planet. Dark energy is a kind of special energy, and its function is naturally extraordinary, because special energy often has special uses. The wormhole summoning that Li Ming learned before depends on dark energy. However, the vortex-shaped dark matter in front of him still surprised Li Ming a little. The existence of dark matter is generally in a natural state, just like air, and it will not form crystals like other special energies, because dark energy is an expansive energy. More dark energy gathering will only make its volume expand and even squeeze other substances and will not appear in other forms due to gathering. But if there is an alien civilization that can fully collect and utilize it, it can forcibly change its form through external means to achieve a certain effect. Li Ming's cognition of the specific effect of this energy is limited, and this vortex in front of him is an exception. Out of curiosity, Li Ming's figure has already approached the vortex below, and his slightly narrowed eyes continue to observe the changes in the vortex. With his wise eyes, Li Ming discovered that the dark energy in this vortex is not pure dark energy. Pure dark energy is the energy after dark matter is completely refined. The proportion of dark energy in the vortex in front of him is relatively large, but there is also a lot of dark matter. However, the existence of the vortex in the form of a vortex shows that the energy is controlled by someone, but it has not fully extracted the dark energy, which leads to the presence of dark matter in it. Who is controlling this dark energy? Li Ming looked at the vortex with a puzzled look. After thinking for a moment, Li Ming waved his left hand and injected a green light into it. This green light was Li Ming's consciousness. As the green light spread in the vortex, the situation inside the entire vortex suddenly became clear. At this time, from Li Ming's point of view, the black dark energy vortex seemed to have turned into a clear water surface, and the situation under the water was in full view. The more he saw, the uglier Li Ming's face looked. His eyes widened, and his expression froze instantly. What are those? Li Ming stared at the vortex. At the bottom of the vortex were the souls of aliens. The so-called souls were actually the energy in the bodies of alien civilizations. Because they were completely extracted in an instant, the energy still maintained the same appearance as their bodies. It looked like a soul, but it was actually just energy. Li Ming had used his mental power many times to extract some alien souls directly from their bodies and absorb them directly, so he was very familiar with this. When the soul energy was extracted from the body in an instant, not only did its appearance not change, but it also had complete consciousness. However, this energy needed to be absorbed in time, otherwise it would disintegrate little by little and disappear in the air. The vortex in front of him was exactly like this. The dark energy of the vortex, coupled with the soul energy at the bottom, plus this mountain body that resembled a wine bottle, the whole thing was like a storage tank. The dark energy was the water in the bottle, and the soul energy was something soaked in the water, as if it was being stored. It was also under the effect of dark energy that the soul energy remained intact, neither disintegrated nor disappeared. Looking at all this in front of him, Li Ming fell into deep thought and whispered, "Who did this?" Thinking of this, Li Ming's eyes gathered, and he looked at the vortex again. Then he turned his left hand and a small green dragon appeared in his hand. It was the flying dragon. He locked his eyes on the vortex, waved his left hand, and the green dragon turned into a green light and shot into it. If you want to know more about the vortex, you still have to use the green dragon to explore the consciousness of the soul energy at the bottom. The green dragon passed through the vortex and went straight to the bottom of the lake. Looking at those souls, it swung its body and directly entered one of the souls. Once it entered, the scenes that the other party's consciousness had passed through emerged one by one. A group of aliens escorted by the alien insects were brought here like Li Ming, and they were ruthlessly thrown into this mountain pass by the alien insects. The aliens fell into the black vortex, just like falling into the lake, and were directly swallowed by the black vortex. These aliens were in a coma like Tanjing. After all, these aliens could not have strong mental power and wisdom like Li Ming. After falling into the black vortex, the soul and the body will be slowly separated under the action of the black vortex. The soul sinks to the bottom, and the body floats up. Due to the magical effect of dark energy, although the separation speed is not fast, the soul will not dissipate. In this way, the remaining consciousness of the alien can only watch itself die, which will be extremely painful. The process of watching oneself die little by little is undoubtedly terrifying for everyone. When the soul and the body are completely separated, the alien worm will return to take out the floating body and take it away, but this is not the end. The reason why those precipitated souls are stored is that they are the food of the white-green alien worm. Just like the information Li Ming saw from the operating table of the abandoned spacecraft before, the white-green alien worm will directly devour the energy in the alien's body, so this storage becomes normal. After reading this, Li Ming's mind quickly retracted, his eyes focused again, his mouth slightly opened, and he muttered to himself, "It seems that it was that alien insect." As he was whispering, there was a buzzing sound above his head. Li Ming immediately raised his head slightly and looked up, only to see an alien insect flying in from the red light of the top mountain pass. When the alien insect saw Li Ming, his eyes lit up slightly, as if he was a little surprised. Li Ming naturally looked back at the other party. Obviously, this alien insect was the one that had thrown Li Ming here just now, and now it came here to salvage the body. Li Ming looked at the other party fiercely, snorted coldly, and suddenly swung his right hand. A golden light shot out. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the whole flying insect was instantly reduced to ashes. After doing all this, Li Ming turned his gaze back to the vortex in front of him. However, when he looked at it, Li Ming's eyes suddenly widened a little, his face slightly raised, his mouth slightly opened, and he exclaimed, "Not good." Forgot about Tanjing. Li Ming did not hesitate at the moment, and flew out from the top of the mountain pass. At this time, Li Ming was already extremely worried. After all, the alien insect had come to salvage Li Ming's body, and Tanjing was in front of Li Ming, so it was even more dangerous. When he came to the top of the mountain pass, Li Ming waved his left hand again, and the flying dragon below shot out. After all, there were dozens of small hills of different sizes in front of Li Ming, and it was not easy to find the specific location of Tanjing. The flying dragon went in one direction, and Li Ming went in another direction, and began to check each mountain pass one by one. After a while, Li Ming had checked the entire area. At this time, Li Ming was floating quietly in the air, with a puzzled look on his face. His eyes kept looking at the mountain passes, and he whispered in confusion, "Not here? It shouldn't be." According to Li Ming's thinking, since the white-green alien insects only devour human souls, why is Tanjing not here? Is there another place to store souls? Li Ming thought about it, but he couldn't figure it out for a while. However, after thinking about it, Li Ming had a new idea in his mind. The energy in the body was running, and the surface of the body flashed with blue light. Then Li Ming's body shape began to change. After a twist, Li Ming turned into the shape of the flying alien insect. This is one of Li Ming's magical abilities, the magic shadow incarnation. With the blessing of Hukong, the use and mastery of this ability has also undergone tremendous changes. It is no longer limited by volume, and the details of energy and incarnation can be handled in detail, which is incomparable before. After the transformation, Li Ming flew straight away. Leaving this area, Li Ming came to the vertical position of the well. At this time, it could continue to extend downwards, and could be freely entered to both sides. It was like an endless corridor with rooms on both sides. It was naturally not easy to find a person in such a huge area. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405, Surprising Discovery. The walls of the well were uneven, with some places protruding, and some places sunken, like a vertical cave, with alien insects flying by from time to time. While flying, Li Ming used his consciousness to obtain information from the alien insects around him. Li Ming could not obtain too much information from the consciousness of these alien insects, and could only get a general direction. All the information pointed to the deeper part of the well. According to the partial information obtained, Li Ming approached the bottom little by little. The closer he got to the bottom, the thicker the dark breath became, and there was more dark energy and dark matter mixed in it. I don't know how long he flew, but under Li Ming's perception, the appearance of the bottom of the well has become clear. The landform at the bottom is extremely complex, a bit like high mountains and a bit like sandy and rocky land. All kinds of landforms exist, and there are also a large number of alien insects walking back and forth. These alien insects have different shapes and sizes, but there are not many of them. They are sparse and loose, and can be seen everywhere, not dense. At the same time, each individual is busy with his own things, looking like he is doing his job. The flying insects that Li Ming transformed into seemed to be commonplace here, and those alien insects didn't care. But Li Ming saw a lot of information he wanted from them and moved his body and continued to fly away. The space under the ground was huge, like another world, as if it was the surface of another planet, but it was darker here, and there was a strong dark energy in the air. According to the information Li Ming got, the leader of all the alien insects here was the white-green alien insect, the shackle insect. In addition, Li Ming did not get any other valuable information. After all, low-level alien insects don't have much consciousness. Just like robots without thoughts, as long as they are given orders, they will execute orders regardless of their own safety and do anything. Li Ming flew slowly along the ground. As he went deeper, a new environment had already appeared. A large area of buildings appeared in his eyes. This suddenly appeared building area made Li Ming frown slightly. The entire building area is full of high-rise buildings. The theme building is based on high-rise buildings. There are also some other types of buildings mixed in, but the overall feeling is a ruin and broken walls. These buildings are very similar to the ones Li Ming saw on his home planet Earth, except that the walls of the buildings are completely aged and the buildings are incomplete, as if they had been baptized by war and are incomplete. Most of the buildings are incomplete, like broken walls, and have been abandoned for a long time. The surfaces of the buildings and the streets in the buildings are all inhabited by Zerg. Judging from the general appearance of the buildings, there should have been civilized creatures here, but now it has been completely occupied by the Zerg. These Zerg are also busy in the building complex. Some are carrying things, like workers, and some are walking around casually like patrolling troops. Each Zerg has its own position and responsibilities. Li Ming quickly locked onto one of the buildings with his eyes. This building is semicircular, like a steamed bun, located in the middle of the building area. Although it is also damaged, it is relatively intact compared to other buildings. The reason why he focused his mind on this building is entirely because most of the information Li Ming obtained came from this building, and the Zerg leader, the worm, may also be in this building. However, Li Ming did not approach rashly, but let King Lang sneak into it first, while he circled around. King Lang entered the building in a flash. As soon as he entered, Li Ming was shocked. If you only look at this building from a high place, it doesn't seem that big. It's just several times bigger than other buildings and more conspicuous. But once you enter it, the feeling changes immediately, as if you have entered another world. The building is divided into 3 floors. King Lang went to the top floor first after entering. The top floor is the area at the top of the semicircle of the building. There are no separate rooms inside. It is like a square, but it is filled with black machines. These machines are also very old. They seem to be abandoned here like the buildings here. Each machine is not very big, just like the computers placed vertically and horizontally in the internet cafe. There is no other items, except a small path in the middle for walking. There is an oval transparent sphere directly above each machine, like a transparent egg, and there are small aliens inside. Through King Lang's observation, it was found that these small aliens are also alive, just like babies in the womb, getting energy and growing in the sphere, and sometimes wriggling. King Lang saw this scene, and Li Ming, who was in the air, was stunned. He couldn't help but whispered, "What's going on? Is this a test tube baby?" King Lang continued to wander around, carefully observing everything here. On the surface, the situation here is indeed somewhat similar to what Li Ming guessed, and it is very similar to human test tube babies. But there are Zergs around here. Why did this thing, which should only exist in civilized creatures, appear in the world of Zergs? Could it be that Zergs and civilized creatures can coexist? Li Ming couldn't believe what he saw, and couldn't figure out the reason. After observing for a while, King Lang moved, passed through the roof, and came directly to the 2nd floor. As soon as he arrived at the 2nd floor, what King Lang saw shocked Li Ming again. This 2nd floor made Li Ming dumbfounded and stunned. What he saw was a huge machine, just like an assembly line in a factory. And there were also a large number of aliens operating and working here. As for what was being processed here, Li Ming couldn't figure it out for a while, so he could only let King Lang check it out one by one. King Lang began to fly around these machines. Because it was in a phantom state and could fly freely without obstacles, it was naturally faster to obtain information here. But when the flying dragon flew around for a week, Li Ming suddenly opened his eyes a little wider. Li Ming turned into a flying insect, staring at the building with his eyes, showing an incredible expression. This is the tissue embryo of humans and Zerg. How is this possible? Li Ming even found it difficult to imagine the scene that King Lang saw. As he said this, King Lang began to fly again. As Li Ming saw, the equipment here was to fuse human biological tissue with Zerg biological tissue, thus giving birth to a new race, Zerg civilization. Although he saw this manufacturing factory, Li Ming still couldn't believe it. After all, this method was something that Li Ming had never seen since he entered the advanced civilization. Of course, Li Ming had heard of the legend of creating civilized races. Not to mention advanced civilizations, even low-level civilizations on Earth, had also had such speculations. Because as far as the creatures on Earth are concerned, humans have always been considered to be the most fully evolved creatures on Earth. But what is puzzling, is that we still cannot adapt to the Earth's environment. For example, if humans are exposed to the sun, their skin will be sunburned. It is very difficult for women to give birth, with a high incidence of chronic diseases, and food needs to be cooked. It is also reflected in the strange gravity environment of the Earth. Not to mention getting rid of the Earth's constraints, and flying into space. Even when taking a simple elevator, the human body function will be seriously troubled. Most people will unnaturally develop symptoms of fear of heights, after rising to a certain height away from the ground, and even dizziness and coma. And more than that, any spacecraft will be bound by a strong energy when trying to leave the Earth's orbit, and there is an invisible gravitational circle outside the Earth. There is still no conclusion on the origin of human beings, but it is worth doubting that, if the theory of evolution is true, then why other species have remained the same for hundreds of millions of years, while humans have developed to this point in just tens of thousands of years? Has the Earth failed to evolve an intelligent species for billions of years, and apes have wisdom without evolution? Humans have also deeply suspected that humans may also be a hybrid of alien creatures and another creature, and then be locked on the Earth for civilization. In this way, a new civilized species was born. From the perspective of other aliens, humans are actually strange and strange. Chapter 406, Mysterious Geocentric Civilization. It is not difficult to trap humans on Earth. Many advanced civilizations have been constantly speculating on the origin of their existence, but no one has found the answer yet. The biggest barrier between humans and the universe is the speed of light. Maybe there will be progress only after humans have a transmission system. What Li Ming is seeing now is a process of creation, but Li Ming believes that creating a civilization is definitely not something that the advanced civilizations that Li Ming currently knows can do. What's more, it is just a world of Zerg. Seeing this, Li Ming wanted to see what was going on. He consciously controlled King Lang and continued to explore the next floor. King Lang passed through the floor and came to the first floor. As soon as he entered this first floor, King Lang began to be cautious, because in the empty first floor, King Lang saw the leader of the Zerg, the shackles at a glance. The white-green shackles lay quietly on the ground, and the morning glory on its head was also closed. Obviously, this beast was resting at this time. It was extremely important for Li Ming to confirm this. Because of this, Li Ming's King Lang could explore the surroundings more boldly. There was no alien insect on the first floor, only the shackles. Li Ming's King Lang first bypassed the shackles and began to move around the first floor. After a simple inspection, Li Ming frowned again. Although the first floor was basically the same as the previous two floors, both were large spaces. The items on the first floor were all items of civilized creatures. There were huge alchemy equipment, small alchemy equipment, and even some that Li Ming had never seen before. There were strange characters on these devices. Li Ming could not read the meaning of these characters, but the appearance of the characters seemed familiar. Strange equipment and characters of unknown origin could never be created by the Zerg. Only civilized creatures could have them. But why did so many of them appear here? After swinging his tail, King Lang stopped tangling with these. Although he was curious and had questions, Li Ming's current goal was to find Tanjing. As for other things, he was not considering them for the time being. If he wanted to find Tanjing, the fastest way was to explore the consciousness and memory of the shackles. Slowly approaching the worm, King Lang's ability has been stimulated, just like Li Ming's wisdom eye. Taking advantage of the worm's sleep, King Lang began to unscrupulously explore the information in its brain. Since Li Ming's interval advancement, King Lang has had the same ability as Li Ming's wisdom eye, and it is natural to explore information. With the stimulation of the wisdom eye ability, King Lang seems to be Li Ming's third eye. Looking at the worm is like looking at a warehouse full of information, and the more you look, the more you will immerse yourself in it. This worm is indeed extraordinary. In its brain consciousness, Li Ming found a huge amount of memory consciousness, which made Li Ming also feel difficult. After all, the other party is a Zerg, which is completely different from human memory storage. It becomes complicated to find something. The information in its brain is chaotic and complicated, just like tens of thousands of photos flying in the brain. Each photo is a memory point. When Li Ming locks on one of the photos, he only needs to click it lightly, and the photo will start to play this memory in the form of a video. But facing a huge amount of memories, it is obviously not that easy to find Tang Jing's whereabouts. Instead of searching like this, it is better to let King Lang withdraw from his brain and search in the surrounding buildings. After all, this is where the opponent's base is located. Just when Li Ming was about to give up, a photo suddenly floated past Li Ming's eyes from the huge amount of photos. The content and environment of the photo were somewhat similar to the current place, and Li Ming was quickly attracted by it. With a light click, the photo stopped directly and came to Li Ming's eyes like a screen. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and began to watch. Of course, the speed of consciousness to explore information is extremely fast, not like watching a movie in reality, which takes a long time, but it is not easy to find the accurate information you need from the huge amount of information. As the picture flashed, Li Ming's face changed immediately, and he even whispered, "This memory point turned out to be." As he spoke, Li Ming had already sunk into this memory intently. This wandering planet has existed for a long time. When the worm first came to this planet, it was still a barren planet. At that time, the worm was just an ordinary Zerg creature like other Zergs. It was the advanced civilization from the geocentric civilization that brought the Zerg to this planet. However, in the memory of the worm, the appearance of the geocentric civilization was very vague. Li Ming could not see the other party's image at all, and could only follow the perspective of the worm's memory. Li Ming still had some knowledge about the geocentric civilization. The Io ruins in the outer system of the Milky Way were the remains of the geocentric civilization. Li Ming also obtained the animal illustrations from there, and learned that the geocentric civilization was one of the ancient civilizations, on par with the aerospace civilization. This time, from the memory of the worm, it was Li Ming's second time to learn about the geocentric civilization. After the geocentric civilization brought the Zerg to this wandering planet, it began to build large-scale projects, dig tunnels, extract dark energy, and eventually built the city in front of it deep underground. Of course, the geocentric civilization did not come here to settle down, but to conduct its own experiments on the Zerg. Just like the equipment King Lang saw on the second and third floors, they were all products before the geocentric civilization, but at that time, the geocentric civilization incubated a synthesis of Zerg genes and beast genes, aiming to create a stronger species. However, during the experiment, an accident occurred, and a large number of experimental bodies mutated and escaped the control of the geocentric civilization, and then the entire experimental base fell into danger. A large number of synthetic mutants began to attack the aliens, and the geocentric civilization had no choice but to abandon the experimental site. The geocentric civilization chose to leave just like that, which was also the reason why the geocentric civilization chose the wandering planet. But the mutant experimental bodies left here began to fight each other. These unconscious creatures became extremely powerful after adding the genes of the beasts. After a long fight, the Shackles finally stood out and became the overlord here. The Shackles have a strong consciousness attack ability and also have independent consciousness. Although it is not as good as civilized creatures, it is already very rare. In the following time, this wandering planet continued to shuttle freely in the universe. When passing through a certain galaxy, this planet with dark energy itself would naturally attract civilized creatures. After all, dark energy is also a special energy, and it is also the energy that many civilizations want to collect. But as long as they are on this planet, no one will be spared. All aliens who come to this planet will find it difficult to escape the powerful consciousness attack ability of the shackles. Once captured by the shackles will devour the souls of these aliens, making their own consciousness stronger and stronger, and the control of this wandering planet will become more and more handy. Over the long years, the shackles began to become more and more powerful. This wandering planet has become an empire completely ruled by it. Not only that, the shackles have also completed their transformation and evolution, and can use the equipment left by the geocentric civilization before. At first, the shackles only hatched the Zerg, but as its consciousness grew, hatching the Zerg was far from satisfying the shackles, and new hatching plans emerged. It is to synthesize the genes of civilized creatures with the genes of Zerg, and create new species. The alien insects that Li Ming saw when he arrived at the bottom of the well were the products of this hatching plan, which can also explain why the Zerg here can work in an orderly manner like the civilized biological world. Seeing this, Li Ming's face was extremely ugly. After all, the synthesis of civilized creatures and Zerg is horrifying just by hearing it. For Li Ming's home planet civilization, this is against human ethics, but in the universe civilization, it seems to be commonplace. The hatching of new species by the shackles is not to randomly connect any aliens with the Zerg. There are two important factors involved. One is women, and the other is a civilization background. Only alien civilizations that meet these two factors can be used by the shackles. Seeing these two pieces of information, Li Ming's eyes lit up and he whispered, "No wonder Tanjing disappeared, I guess." As he was talking, the sleeping worm suddenly woke up, which caused Li Ming's exploration of the information in its brain to be abnormal. Originally, the information in its brain was a series of slowly floating photos, but after waking up, those photos suddenly rotated rapidly. Just like a tornado suddenly rolled up a pile of leaves, it became chaotic, and at the same time, various white and green light beams began to fly around in his brain. The light beam was the autonomous consciousness of the worm, and it also rotated around the storm in its brain. At this time, it would be even more difficult to obtain information, and once Li Ming's consciousness was touched by the light beam, it would be detected by the other party's consciousness, and then it would be very bad. Chapter 407. After all, you are just a bug. In desperation, Li Ming could only stop searching for information in the brain of the shackle insect and let King Lang turn to another place to look for Tanjing's whereabouts. But just as King Lang was flying, the trumpet flower on the top of the shackle insect suddenly turned, and the flower and core were aimed at the position of the flying dragon, just like a trumpet suddenly aimed at Li Ming. At this moment, Li Ming, who was in the sky above the construction area, was suddenly startled, as if someone had discovered some secret. Almost at the same time, the alien insects that were still busy around suddenly stopped, and pairs of green eyes also focused their gazes on Li Ming. Li Ming's eyes widened a little when he saw this, and a blue light flashed on his body. The original Zerg body suddenly returned to human form, and his slightly narrowed eyes looked at the semicircular building in surprise. The mental power of this shackle insect is so. Li Ming was whispering to himself, and suddenly there was a sharp pain in his head, and the same pain as before came. As if there were a dozen sharp blades swinging and slashing in his brain. Li Ming immediately tensed his nerves. His expression was concentrated, and the blue flames wrapped his whole body with a bang. At this moment, the flying insects around him also quickly surrounded him. Li Ming naturally ignored these flying insects. With a wave of his right hand, a white electric current had formed in the palm of his hand, and the current continued to radiate around with Li Ming's palm as the center. The sound of kai kai cha cha was endless, and the current continued to flow around Li Ming's body in an irregular form. Looking at the flying insects that surrounded him, Li Ming snorted disdainfully and whispered, "Energy control the electric current field." As he said this, Li Ming's right hand suddenly clenched hard, and with a light snap, the electric light in his hand disappeared instantly, just like a bright light bulb went out instantly. Seeing the disappearing current, the alien insects didn't understand, but immediately attacked Li Ming. Li Ming's eyeballs moved slightly in his eye sockets, and he glanced at the alien insects around his body, completely ignoring them. The fierce alien insects rushed over frantically, but when they flew to the air more than 10 meters away from Li Ming's body, there was a sudden sizzling sound. The arc jumped, the white light flashed, and the alien insects instantly evaporated in the electric current with a bang. The airspace around Li Ming seemed to be empty, but it was actually filled with strong electric currents. It was Li Ming's electric current field. As long as the alien insects approached, they would be attacked. Despite this, a large number of alien insects still launched attacks intermittently, but the end was the same. They could not get close to Li Ming at all. It was impossible to get close, and some slightly larger beetles began to attack from a distance. When they opened their mouths, a ball of green liquid spurted out. Li Ming had naturally considered this long ago. He waved his right hand again, and the golden mist spread out. The green liquid entered the mist in groups. The golden mist was Li Ming's magic shield. From a distance, it seemed that the green liquid was shot into it, but after entering the mist, the power completely disappeared and fell from the mist like raindrops. Attacks from far and near could not do anything to Li Ming. With Li Ming's current strength, these alien insects are naturally far inferior to him, so he doesn't need to take them seriously at all. But at this moment, in the construction area below, a white-green alien insect was slowly crawling on the street in the middle of the high-rise building. It was the shackle insect. The direction of the shackle insect's movement was exactly where Li Ming was. As the shackle insect moved, all kinds of alien insects crawled around it. Those alien insects accompanied the shackle insect on both sides, like a personal guard. These alien insects were also different from ordinary alien insects, and seemed to have some special abilities. Li Ming was also aware of the shackle insect's approach to Li Ming, and his originally relaxed expression immediately tightened. His eyes suddenly turned downwards, to look at the position of the shackle insect. As the shackle insect approached, the intensity of the consciousness attack that Li Ming sensed became stronger and stronger, which forced Li Ming to shift his attention immediately. After reaching a certain distance from Li Ming, the figure of the worm suddenly stopped, but the morning glory on its head kept facing Li Ming's position, and the green flame on Li Ming's body also burned violently, while also looking at the other party. "Can you get closer to my body?" the worm said with consciousness. This sudden voice in his mind made Li Ming startled, because there are not many non-civilized creatures that can communicate with civilized creatures with consciousness. The worm can do this now, entirely based on its powerful mental power. Li Ming also clearly knows that the closer you get to the other party, the stronger the consciousness attack you will receive. For Li Ming, who has wisdom and intelligence, he is naturally not afraid. Thinking of Tanjing, whose life and death is still unknown, Li Ming immediately narrowed his eyes and slowly descended from the air. Every time he lowered his altitude, the green flame on Li Ming's body burned more violently, as if the flame was affected by other factors, and was a little shaky. When Li Ming's body landed completely, it was only a few dozen meters away from the worm. The mental power of both parties was like two strong winds blowing against each other, and the momentum had already suppressed the surrounding alien insects from approaching. Under such a strong mental power collision, if they approached rashly, the alien insects would definitely go insane and faint. Li Ming looked at the other party coldly, although it was just an alien insect. But Li Ming did not dare to underestimate it at all, and his whole body was tense. He opened his mouth slightly. "Where is that girl?" Li Ming's cold voice entered the other party's brain, and his cold expression was full of murderous intent. The shackle insect was relatively calm. After hesitating for a while, he replied, "Girl, come to me, and I'll tell you." Li Ming did not move at all, just looking at the other party coldly. Seeing this, the morning glory on the top of the shackle insect swayed slightly, and said again, "What? Don't you dare? TSK. Li Ming showed a disdainful smile, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he took a long breath and said, "Yes, we can indeed have a good chat about that girl." As he said so, Li Ming's leg suddenly raised and took a step. Then, 2 steps, 3 steps, a little closer to the shackles. As they walked, the mental power collision between them became more intense. The closer they got to the shackles, the stronger the mental power collision became. When they were less than 20 meters away from the shackles, Li Ming was already struggling. At this time, he had to use a lot of strength to take each step. At this time, there were no alien insects around. Even if Li Ming stood still, the mental power between them had caused the small gravel on the ground around him to tremble slightly. Li Ming took a few deep breaths and stood still without moving forward. But the morning glory on the top of the shackles shook twice, like shaking its head, and said, "Is this your limit? You can't even get close to me, and you still want to save that girl?" Li Ming still stood still, looking at the other party quietly. His originally tense expression suddenly relaxed and became calm, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After this smile, the flames on Li Ming's body suddenly changed shape, and the powerful mental power spread out, just like a vacuum bomb suddenly exploded, and the airflow spread out in a ring state. Like ripples on the water, it covered the entire building area in just an instant. And all the alien insects affected by the ripples immediately widened their eyes. Their expressions were dull, and their faces were full of fear, as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. The flames on Li Ming's body also turned into jet-like flames, extending from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, as if the soles of Li Ming's feet were the tail of a jet plane, constantly and violently emitting high-temperature flames. However, the flames at this time were not high temperature, but powerful mental power. Under this influence, cracks continued to appear on the ground around Li Ming's body, and sand, dust, and gravel slowly floated more than 2 feet high in the air under the influence of Li Ming's mental power. At this time, Li Ming looked at Zichen with cold contempt, opened his mouth slightly, and said, "After all, you are just a bug." Hearing what Li Ming said, Zichen did not respond immediately, but Li Ming had already sensed its inner anger. He saw that the morning glory on Zichen's head suddenly shrank slightly, just like a spring being compressed. With this compression, the white-green morning glory suddenly turned white-red, just like the red face of people. "What did you say?" The angry information of Zichen entered Li Ming's mind. Chapter 408, Mental Power Showdown. The angry voice flashed through Li Ming's mind, and the next moment, the morning glory suddenly stretched out, and a powerful mental force came towards him like a storm. Bang! A dull sound rang in Li Ming and the other party's brains. At the same time as the two mental forces collided, the high-rise buildings within hundreds of meters around them suddenly collapsed and shattered. The high-rise buildings seemed to be decomposed, breaking into pieces. This kind of shattering was like the whole being suddenly split into thousands of pieces, but it was just shattering, not falling to the ground, and there was no violent sound. Each piece was floating in the air, as if in the vacuum of the universe, and even the dust did not disperse. And this is the power generated by the confrontation of mental forces. The red trumpet of the shackles was still facing Li Ming, and Li Ming was still standing still. At this time, both of them were using all their strength, and did not dare to relax. The battle of mental power is different from other battles. It cannot be avoided, and can only be confronted by force with strength. If there is slackness and mistakes at this time, the result will inevitably be devastating. Li Ming gritted his teeth, still looking at the other party with a fierce look, and suddenly raised his right leg slowly, and took a step forward. This action immediately startled the insect. Although it seemed to be a small step, for the entire stalemate space, it undoubtedly made the confrontation of mental power more intense. The floating building fragments around suddenly cracked. Even the ground had cracks, as if Li Ming's foot had cracked the ground. The morning glory of the insect had been fully extended, and powerful mental power was constantly output from it, but seeing the steps taken by Li Ming, the insect was extremely surprised. Under such a fierce collision, that step was unimaginable. And just when the insect was surprised, Li Ming's left leg suddenly lifted up and took another step. The moment this step was taken, cracks appeared again in the floating building fragments in the air, and at the same time, the cracks on the soles of Li Ming's feet also increased a little. At this time, the insect was obviously a little uneasy, and the whole body was trembling slightly. This trembling was naturally related to the confrontation of mental power. Li Ming's forehead was also bulging with veins, as if his nerves had been stretched to the limit. The blood vessels on the surface of his skin also burst, forming distinct lines, and giving people the feeling that the blood vessels were about to burst at any time. At this time, the mental power confrontation had completely possessed destructive power beyond consciousness. This was different from the damage to the surroundings during the previous confrontation. The current damage came entirely from the impact of mental power on the surrounding environment. In this environment, not to mention alien insects, even advanced civilizations in the second zone would find it difficult to resist. Li Ming's ability to be so strong was also largely related to his own strong body. After taking Loyang pills, Li Ming's body was no longer the same as before. At this level, it was completely enough to control his own energy. The confrontation continued. One person and one insect were in a desperate state. Both sides were close to their limits, and now it was a matter of whose limit was stronger. It was in such an oppressive environment that Li Ming's right foot suddenly lifted up again. The moment his right foot was lifted up, the body of the shackle insect immediately trembled slightly. "You guy, are you going to?" The voice of the shackle insect sounded in Li Ming's mind. Li Ming raised his head slightly, and at the moment of looking up, his eyes suddenly flashed with cold light, and a breath of life and death was released from them. Although the shackles have no eyes, their powerful mental induction is more useful than any eyes. The mental power of the shackles is completely different from that of civilized creatures like Li Ming. Li Ming's mental power comes from the addition of spiritual civilization and the late wisdom star, while the mental power of the shackles comes from the nature of non-civilized creatures. In the sensory world without sound, the communication of the shackles depends entirely on mental power. The experiments of the geocentric civilization and its years of devouring consciousness energy have made its mental power strong enough and very aggressive. The collision between the two is naturally extremely strong. With a light sound of pop, Li Ming's right foot landed on the ground, and he took another step. At this moment, the surrounding building fragments were directly shattered again, turning into smaller building blocks, and the cracks under his feet also spread more than 10 meters away. It seemed like the power of this kick, but in fact, Li Ming did not get closer, which made the spatial pressure in the area even heavier. It was the pressure of the two forces that caused this situation. At this time, the body of the worm began to change. The surface of the soft body began to ripple, just like the ripples of the water, ups and downs, flashing and rolling. Obviously, the physical competition became particularly important at this time. Li Ming's eyes were still staring at the other party fiercely. The heel of his left foot suddenly bent, and he was on tiptoe, as if he was ready to move forward again. But such a subtle movement was noticed by the worm. "Wait," the worm suddenly said. Li Ming's expression relaxed when he heard this. At this time, Li Ming had already reached his limit. The constant approach was a common pressure for both sides. It was hard to say who would win or lose, but after hearing the voice of the worm, Li Ming's left foot fell back to the distance. "Let go, that girl." Li Ming blurted out these words fiercely from between his teeth. The shackled insect could only look at Li Ming helplessly. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Okay, I'll let her go." As he said this, several alien insects in the distance seemed to have received some orders. They suddenly moved and flew into the building. Li Ming saw all of this, but he couldn't see Tanjing. Li Ming couldn't relax at this moment. While waiting, the building in the distance suddenly boomed. A loud noise was heard, and a huge fireball broke through the wall from the inside of the building, forming a large hole directly on the semicircular building. And then, a figure flew out from it. It was Tanjing. At this time, many alien insects immediately surrounded him, but the alien insects did not take action, but surrounded Tanjing from a distance. The poison energy in Tanjing's body has been basically eliminated, and his strength is recovering bit by bit. These alien insects will naturally not be ignored. He raised his right hand, and the palm of his hand flashed with fire, preparing to attack again. But before Tanjing could make a move, Li Ming's consciousness immediately sent a message to the other party. "Hurry up, you drive the spaceship away first." Upon hearing Li Ming's voice, Tanjing turned his eyes to the construction area. In a certain area of the construction area, several buildings had been completely shattered, and the debris was floating in the air, and Li Ming's whole body was already emitting burning blue flames. The shackle insect that was confronting Li Ming also had a red light flashing on its body. On the surface, it seemed that nothing unusual had happened to the two. Tanjing then turned around, intending to go over to help Li Ming, but before he moved, Li Ming's voice came again. "Don't come over. Hurry up. Hurry up." Li Ming's somewhat angry voice filled Tanjing's mind. Tanjing also hesitated in place for a while, and took a closer look with his eyes again, and his face changed instantly. Tanjing's civilization level is 1.2, which is a rare aerospace civilization among advanced civilizations. However, in terms of mental power, she is not at the same level as Li Ming. Therefore, when she tried to use her mental power to sense it, she immediately became pale. In terms of Tanjing's mental power, she was shocked just by touching the edge of Li Ming's confrontation area, let alone going deeper. This also made Tanjing understand why Li Ming didn't let her get closer. However, facing Li Ming, who saved her many times, it was really difficult for Tanjing to leave like this, not to mention that Tanjing still had Li Ming's consciousness in her consciousness, which was mainly the effect of the refining pill. Li Ming also noticed Tanjing's hesitation at the moment. After glancing at that direction fiercely, he used the little consciousness in his brain and said, "Hurry up and drive the spacecraft away from here." An order, mixed with some personal factors of Li Ming, was firmly transmitted to Tanjing's ears. Tanjing's face turned cold again. After looking at Li Ming for a few times, she turned around and flew away quickly. Chapter 409, just a little bit. Seeing Tanjing leave, Li Ming was relieved. He could say that he had no worries. His eyes changed slightly when he looked at the shackles. Li Ming couldn't relax at this time. With the attack power of the shackles in front of him, if Tanjing didn't leave the wandering planet, he would be attacked by the shackles again. It would be dangerous. Therefore, Li Ming's restrictions at this time were extremely important. The alien insects around couldn't get close. Li Ming and the shackles continued to confront each other. Neither of them was willing to relax at all, but Li Ming didn't move forward. What Li Ming wanted now was persistence. As long as Tanjing left, the alien insects around him would naturally be unable to do anything to Li Ming. If he could return to the ground and meet with Tanjing before she drove the spaceship away, it would be the best. After a moment of confrontation, Li Ming moved his body and his left leg suddenly stepped back subconsciously. Seeing Li Ming retreat, the shackles made a questioning sound. Even though he didn't understand Li Ming's intention, his mind was also controlled by the opponent. At this moment, Li Ming must have thought about retreating unscathed. Li Ming still looked at the opponent coldly, and then took a step back with his right foot. Although it was extremely difficult to move forward, it was also easy to retreat. However, he couldn't relax all of a sudden, otherwise the opponent's mental power would suddenly attack him, and Li Ming would find it difficult to withstand it. After retreating 2 steps, Li Ming still wanted to retreat, to increase the distance and slow down the mental power of the opponent, so that he would have a chance to escape. But when Li Ming was about to take another step back, the fleshy body of the shackle worm suddenly moved forward. This made Li Ming frown and stare at the opponent again. Obviously, the shackle worm was unwilling to let Li Ming go. "Fuck you, I don't want to waste time now." Li Ming cursed in his heart, but it was useless. Now Li Ming was in a passive state. Although Li Ming wanted to leave this place, he could only be pressed by the opponent step by step in the current situation. Li Ming had no better way. In desperation, Li Ming could only resist. This confrontation became a consumption. The energy in the body has become the key to determine the outcome. Li Ming has many Liuan pills on his body, so he doesn't have to worry. Just as Li Ming was preparing for a long-term confrontation, the body of the shackles shrank slightly and retarded. Seeing this scene, Li Ming's eyes widened a little and his mouth smiled slightly. Obviously, the energy in the body of this shackles is also limited. Such a long-term and large-scale use will inevitably be exhausted. Although the opponent wants to kill Li Ming, his strength does not allow it. Li Ming showed a happy expression and followed the opponent to slowly retreat. The two of them retreated gradually at the same time, which made the mental power between the two relax slightly. Li Ming retreated step by step, and the shackles crawled back little by little. As the distance increased, the energy used by the mental power of the two also decreased. The blue flame on Li Ming's body was originally burning fiercely, but now it gradually stabilized. The red halo on the body of the shackle insect also faded. Without the strong mental power to counteract and oppress, the building debris floating in the air began to fall little by little, just like rain. Dust and smoke drifted everywhere, and soon everything in front of Li Ming was blurred. Li Ming could no longer see the figure of the shackle insect. After a while, all the building debris fell to the ground. Looking at the floating dust, Li Ming felt a little relieved, but before he could relax for a few seconds, Li Ming's brows suddenly tightened. His eyes turned slightly to the left and right, his face darkened again, and he whispered, "Trouble is coming again." As he said this, Li Ming took out a Liuan pill and put it into his mouth. And around Li Ming's body, a large number of alien insects had already appeared densely. Various types of alien insects were crawling everywhere, on the buildings, and on the ground, approaching Li Ming little by little. Li Ming clenched his right hand tightly, and the electric light reappeared. The electric current kept flowing and flashing around Li Ming's body, and the sound of sizzling was endless. However, the electric current disappeared after a while. As the electric current disappeared, the electric current field formed again around Li Ming's body. After doing this, Li Ming looked at the alien insects around him again. He flew into the sky with a move. As Li Ming flew away, a large number of flying insects followed him. These flying insects had no intention of attacking, but just followed behind Li Ming. Li Ming was puzzled at first, but after flying for a while, Li Ming's frown suddenly realized it. These flying insects did not intend to attack, because the shackles were also in a weak period, and the energy in their bodies was insufficient, so the alien insects were needed to drive Li Ming away from here. This was also the order these alien insects received from the shackles. Seeing this, Li Ming relaxed even more, stood up and increased the speed of flight, flying straight up along the well hole. After a while, Li Ming flew straight from the well hole to the ground. At this time, he was still in the deep pit. Li Ming glanced and flew directly in a direction. The direction Li Ming was heading was exactly the direction of the spaceship. Because the entire planet was shrouded in darkness, Li Ming could not be sure whether the spaceship was still there. While flying, he opened his consciousness completely. Not long after flying, Li Ming's eyes lit up, his eyes widened a little, and a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. Because Li Ming's consciousness had sensed the existence of the spaceship. Knowing that the spaceship had not left, Li Ming accelerated his flying speed. As he continued to fly, he could see the location of the spaceship under his sight. With a smile on his mouth, he was secretly happy, and said to himself, "Fortunately, I caught up." But at this moment, the spaceship in the distance suddenly trembled slightly, and the entire surface of the spaceship flashed. This was the scene of the transmission starting. Seeing this scene, Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and he said directly, "Fuck, no way." As soon as the voice fell, there was a muffled bang in the air in the distance, and the spaceship disappeared directly. The moment the spaceship disappeared, Li Ming's smile disappeared, and his figure stopped in place, staring blankly at the location of the spaceship, leaving only the empty darkness. Li Ming was stunned, and his heart became extremely complicated. He stood in the air motionless. When he was underground before, Li Ming still hoped that Tanjing would evacuate first. After all, he could protect himself. Even if there was no spaceship leaving, Li Ming would not be buried on this planet. But now that he successfully escaped and saw the spaceship again, he thought he could leave the wandering planet just like that, but he didn't expect that he was still a step late. At this time, Li Ming's heart was extremely complicated, angry, sighing, and at a loss. He stood in the air for a long time, and his inner emotions could not be calmed for a long time. With a long sigh, Li Ming's eyes looked at the distant sky where the spaceship disappeared. When he was about to turn around, white spots of light appeared in the distant sky, which was the starry sky of the universe. Li Ming looked at it blankly. The starry sky was the same as the night sky on Earth, full of stars. The light was weak, but suddenly it made people fascinated. Starry sky. Li Ming couldn't help whispering. He shook his head slightly, and turned around, and flew to the ground. The appearance of the starry sky indicated that the wandering planet had flown away from the Bunu starfield. As for where it had gone, Li Ming didn't know, but for Li Ming now, those were no longer important, because without a spaceship, Li Ming would not be able to leave from here. His feet slowly landed on the ground, and the wandering planet was no longer so dark at this time. It might be because of the starry sky that made the wandering planet have some dim light. Li Ming turned his head slightly, looked at the direction he had just escaped, and then looked in another direction. Li Ming walked quickly in another direction. Although the shackles worm couldn't do anything to Li Ming couldn't do anything to the other party either. This wandering planet was so huge that Li Ming didn't have to have an unnecessary conflict with the Zerg. Walking along the ground, there was sand under his feet, and occasionally scattered rocks could be seen, some huge, some small, and there were also many damaged spaceships. Li Ming walked on foot on this strange planet, without a purpose or direction, as long as he stayed away from the Zerg. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Li Ming came to a huge rock. A breeze blew, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. Li Ming looked into the distance and a huge deep pit appeared in front of him. Chapter 410 There is a spaceship. There are many such huge deep pits on this wandering planet, and there are many black wells in the deep pits, which are basically the same as the area where the Zerg were located before. Looking at the deep pit, Li Ming was calm, and after hesitating for a while, he flew away. His body flew slowly at the low altitude of this big pit, and his eyes kept scanning the ground below. There are relatively few wells in this deep pit, and the well openings are generally small. The largest one is only a few hundred meters long and wide. After flying for a while, Li Ming finally stopped above the largest well opening. Through Li Ming's conscious observation, the content of dark energy in this huge well is much higher than that of other wells. Dark energy is also a special energy, and there is no harm in collecting some. He squinted his eyes and looked at the well below. His body moved and flew straight down. Li Ming did not go directly into the well, but came to a huge rock on the edge of the well opening. This rock was more than 10 meters high, like a stone pillar. Li Ming's figure landed lightly on the top, and his right hand flipped. Blue light flashed, and after looking at the well in front of him, he gently waved his arm. The star furnace fell down in a flash, and then Li Ming waved his left hand again, and a green light shot out. The green light was Li Ming's consciousness. The star furnace was naturally used to absorb dark energy. With consciousness accompanying it, Li Ming could immediately know if there was any accident below. After doing all this, Li Ming smiled slightly with satisfaction, leaned over and sat cross-legged on the ground, closed his eyes slightly, and began to concentrate on resting. The collection of dark energy is relatively slow. One is the nature of the energy, and the other is that each special energy requires special equipment to collect. Although low-level items such as the star furnace can be collected, it is obviously not as good as those professional equipment. However, Li Ming has nothing to do at the moment, so there is no need to rush. The body began to rest, and Li Ming's flying dragon was also released. After all, on this strange planet, the flying dragon is needed to provide vision, to avoid encountering the Zerg again. During this time, Li Ming only wanted to strengthen the practice of Wukong, energy control. Li Ming had used this ability many times before, and the effect was extraordinary. In addition to energy control, Wukong also has another ability that Li Ming can practice, that is, energy conversion. The two abilities of Wukong are somewhat similar to Huan's flying dragon and coiling dragon, but because Wukong is an ability that intelligent civilization must master, the essential meaning is still very different. Li Ming has not started to learn the ability of energy conversion, but he has also learned a lot about the utility of this ability. The first energy conversion is self-energy conversion. Simply put, it is to convert the energy in your body into another form for attack or defense. For example, the element tribe in the intelligent civilization converts its own energy into element for attack. But for ordinary aliens, they can only practice one, and choose the element that belongs to, and suits them according to the characteristics of their own energy. The elements are very broad and the range is huge. Li Ming's cognition includes gold, wood, water, fire, earth, air, space, light, darkness, thunder, wind, ice, etc. The general element tribe aliens can only decide according to their own situation. The element conversion that Li Ming wants to learn is to convert his own energy into any element he wants. It can be said that with this ability, as long as the body has enough energy, it can create a world containing multiple elements on a planet, which is unimaginable. It is not easy to cultivate this ability. At the beginning, Cottrell and Moore only learned some superficial spiritual consciousness abilities in Wukong. Compared with deeper things, it is naturally extremely difficult. Moreover, if you want to cultivate energy conversion, there is another prerequisite, that you must master energy control. Li Ming is still in the cultivation of energy control. Energy control is mainly the control of external energy of oneself and non-self, but this kind of cultivation is relatively troublesome and cannot be completed overnight. But as long as there is time, Li Ming will still cultivate the content of it wholeheartedly. Once you enter the cultivation, time will pass quickly. Li Ming just closes his eyes, but the stars in the sky are constantly changing. This wandering planet has been in motion, as if it is a celestial body traveling in the universe. The changes in the stars are naturally closely related to the orbit of this wandering planet, but Li Ming has no way of knowing where this planet has arrived and where it will arrive. It seems that he is trapped here. Li Ming can only let nature take its course for the time being. During the long period of cultivation, some interesting things happened. At first, Li Ming cultivated here and nothing unusual happened, but as time went on, some sporadic alien insects began to appear in this giant pit. These alien insects were flying alien insects, and they flew around like patrol soldiers. At first, they did not find Li Ming, but later, the patrol range of the alien insects continued to expand, so Li Ming was discovered by them. Although they were discovered by the alien insects, these alien insects did not attack Li Ming, but just came to see him every now and then. This was indeed quite strange, but Li Ming did not care. As long as there were alien insects, the flying dragon would notice it, but if the other party just came to see him, Li Ming had nothing to avoid. This unintentionally formed a tacit understanding. The Zerg monitored Li Ming at any time, but did not launch an attack. At first, Li Ming was still cautious, but as time went on, Li Ming ignored it. This balance has been maintained, and Li Ming continued to cultivate. As long as there were no large numbers of alien insects approaching, Li Ming would practice with confidence, and not care at all. Time flies by, and Li Ming can't remember how long it has been, but he has completely mastered the energy control, and he has started to practice energy conversion. But before he started practicing, an amazing day came. Above a rocky area, a wave flashed, and a stream of light streaked through the air, as if a drop of water suddenly appeared in the vacuum. Bang! After a muffled sound, a spaceship had emerged. The appearance of this spaceship was rather strange, like a human head, and black strips extended from the bottom of the neck, like black ropes, densely packed. The length and width of the spaceship were hundreds of meters, and it was considered a giant spaceship. As soon as the spaceship appeared, Li Ming, who had closed his eyes, suddenly opened his eyes, and even showed an excited look on his face, as if he had found some treasure. He suddenly stood up, and looked in that direction. "There's a spaceship," Li Ming whispered excitedly, his face full of joy. Under Filong's monitoring, any changes in this airspace were under Li Ming's control, so the appearance of this spaceship was no exception. Without the slightest hesitation, Li Ming flew away. At this moment, the spaceship that had just arrived was like Li Ming's life-saving straw, and he had to hold onto it tightly. At this time, the two sides of the spaceship that looked like ears suddenly flashed with light, and two portals emerged, and then aliens flew out one by one. Under Filong's observation, a total of 4 aliens came out, 2 on each side, and flew quickly in 4 directions after coming out. These 4 aliens were all first-level civilizations, and the directions they went to were also the locations of the deep pits. One of them actually came straight to Li Ming. Originally, Li Ming planned to directly plunder the spaceship, and then control the spaceship to leave, but when he saw aliens coming towards him, Li Ming couldn't help but pause, and the flying figure stopped. Under Filong's monitoring, the aliens' thoughts were also controlled by Li Ming. Looking at the dark distance, his eyes moved slightly, and he thought to himself, so they came for dark energy. As he said this, Li Ming lowered his figure, and hid near a huge rock. The alien flying towards Li Ming is a biological civilization, and the purpose of coming here is to collect dark energy. These are the basic information of the other party. Filong quietly accompanied him in the dark, and more information about this alien also emerged. This person is called Minor, and he comes from the Holmes galaxy of the Perseus galaxy. According to the information recorded in the other party's brain, the location of this wandering planet is no longer in the Milky Way, but in the vacuum universe. Chapter 411, No Choice. It does not belong to any large galaxy, but is floating in the air of the universe. This also shocked Li Ming, because Li Ming has been practicing hard, and did not know how much time has passed, let alone that this wandering planet has actually flown out of the Milky Way. Of course, these are not important for the time being. Leaving here is the most important thing. After a while, A black figure flew over the rock behind Li Ming. It was the alien miner. Its appearance is similar to that of humans, but there are many things under its head, like beards, but they are as thick as fingers. The mouth on its face is square, revealing sharp teeth. It is wearing black unknown metal armor and cloak. The overall look seems to be very fierce, but its heart gives people a sense of kindness. After using the flying dragon to confirm again that it was only one person who arrived here, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and flew straight up. At this time, Miner still didn't notice it at all. His eyes were still completely focused on the black well below, as if he was searching for a place suitable for collecting dark energy. But Li Ming's eyes were already locked on this person. His figure flashed, and a cyan shadow suddenly approached from behind him. Although Li Ming was very fast, he was still noticed by the alert miner, who turned around immediately. When he saw Li Ming, Miner's eyes widened a little. Before he could do anything, Li Ming's right hand quickly stretched out, and the cyan shadow hand extended along his arm, and wrapped the other party. Once wrapped by the cyan shadow, Miner's eyes were dull and his body was stiff, as if he was petrified and couldn't move. At this time, Li Ming looked at the other party quietly, shook his head slightly, and whispered, "There is no way. I'm also trying to survive. I can't help myself. Alien brother." As he spoke, Li Ming's right hand suddenly pulled back, and Miner's soul was extracted. Without soul energy, Miner's body slowly tilted downwards. Li Ming's cyan shadow hand then slowly clenched, and completely absorbed the other party's soul energy. This action was entirely to obtain all the cognition of the other party. Li Ming had thought it through clearly before. It was not impossible to forcibly seize the other party's spaceship, but fighting was inevitable, and more aliens would naturally be killed. If the fighting could be avoided or reduced, and he could leave here, that would naturally be the best option. After absorbing the other party's energy soul, Li Ming also gained a lot of more of the other party's consciousness and cognition. However, Li Ming did not have time to check at this time. The most important thing at the moment was to return to the spaceship first. He looked at the bottom of his feet and saw that Miner's body had fallen into a well below. After just a quiet look, Li Ming turned and left. A moment later, a figure was slowly approaching near the giant head spaceship. It was Miner. At this time, the other three aliens had not returned. After a simple look around, Miner took the lead in entering the spaceship through the portal. Once through the portal, there was a corridor leading directly to the depths. At the end of the corridor was a hall, and aliens could be seen walking back and forth in it from a distance. Miner smiled slightly and walked over quickly. Most of the aliens in the hall were low level. When they saw Miner, they saluted one after another, but Miner ignored them and didn't even look at him. He went straight to the middle of the hall. A blue beam of light then shone down from the top of the hall, and Miner's figure disappeared with the blue light. When his figure reappeared, he was already in the main cabin. Miner was in the middle of the main cabin. He glanced around, and the location of the operating table quickly caught Miner's eye. The operating table was located at the edge. From the perspective of the entire spacecraft, the operating table was located at the forehead of the head spacecraft. The operating table here was surrounded by a semicircle at the edge. The entire operating table was like a small piece of Greenland, with black lines growing on it. There was no picture, only the black lines kept swinging. It was like a lot of soft tentacles growing on the operating table. Miner just took a rough look, raised his hand, and tapped the operating table a few times, and several messages were sent. These messages were sent to the other three aliens who went out to collect dark energy. At this time, the three people were already located directly above the deep pit. As soon as they received the message from Miner, they raised their right arms and the content of the message was quickly conveyed. The three aliens opened their eyes wide after just a rough look at the content. Their expressions also changed drastically. They did not dare to hesitate at all. They turned around and headed straight for the spaceship. However, one of the aliens was located in the deep pit area controlled by the shackles. The alien was located above one of the wells. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a buzzing sound in the well below. The alien frowned and looked down. His face suddenly became ugly. He paused for a second and flew away. But before he flew far, he suddenly had a headache and the alien couldn't help but hold his head and scream. His body was also unstable in the air. He fainted just a few seconds after he screamed. His body fell from the sky and was taken away by a flying alien insect before he landed. As soon as the alien was taken away, something strange happened on the operating table in front of Miner, and one of the small tentacles trembled slightly. Although the operating table here is different from those blue light operating tables, its functions are not weak at all. The reason why the operating table of this spaceship is presented in this form is also closely related to the civilization background to which this operating table belongs. The Holmes galaxy comes from the Perseus galaxy. The development of biological civilization here is naturally different from that of the Milky Way. As the largest galaxy in the local galaxy group, the civilization world of the Perseus galaxy is extremely wonderful. The Holmes people at present are one of them. This biological civilization mainly focuses on alchemy and the manufacture of tools. Their tools are all biological sensing systems. Simply put, the operating table itself is a life. As long as the owner of the spaceship uses consciousness, it can be directly operated without manual operation. It sounds simple to operate a spaceship through consciousness, but that is only for alien beings like Li Ming. Ordinary civilizations are basically manual, otherwise there will be no technology such as operating mirrors to operate water. The magic of the console here is that it can fully sense and communicate with consciousness, which is different from spiritual civilization. Just like Li Ming's flying dragon, the images sensed by the spacecraft can be transmitted to the operator without the need for a blue light screen display. It is relatively advanced. Miner also operated it with ease and smiled. For Miner, this seemed to be commonplace. After learning that one of the senior aliens was taken away, Miner's face sank slightly, and he immediately operated the console in front of him again. This order was the order of the transmission system, and at this time the other two senior aliens had also rushed to the transmission port of the spacecraft. Seeing the abnormal energy on the surface of the spacecraft, the two aliens' faces changed slightly, and they immediately accelerated their flight speed. The strange phenomenon of the spacecraft indicated that the spacecraft was preparing for transmission, which was very critical for the aliens who had not yet entered the spacecraft. If they were abandoned on a wandering planet, the consequences would be very terrible. The light flashed slightly, and after a burst of rapid flight, the two aliens still entered the spacecraft before the spacecraft was transmitted. Of course, this was also because Miner had deliberately delayed the time of transmission. First, he did not find a large number of Zergs, and second, Miner could not bear to leave these fellows here. As soon as the two aliens entered the spaceship that had been prepared for transmission suddenly disappeared with a bang, which meant that it had been teleported away. As soon as the spaceship disappeared, the morning glory of the worm at the bottom of the deep pit lowered slightly, and it whispered to itself in its mind, "That guy finally left." Li Ming's existence is undoubtedly the biggest threat to the worm. The reason why it did not send alien worms to attack is because the worm hopes that Li Ming will leave this wandering planet. Through the induction of its own powerful consciousness, even if Li Ming transformed into the appearance of Miner, he still could not escape the consciousness of the worm. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412, Escape. In the passage of the spaceship, two aliens walked hurriedly. Their rapid steps showed their anger. Both of them looked unhappy. When they came to the middle of the hall, they went straight to the main cabin. At this time, Miner looked at the spaceship that was teleported to space, smiled slightly, and whispered, "Finally left this damn place." As he was talking, a blue light flashed behind him, and two figures appeared in the middle of the main cabin. Sensing the appearance of the two, Miner turned slightly. Without waiting for Miner to do anything, the two aliens who had just appeared came to Miner angrily. One of the aliens shouted directly, "Miner, what do you mean? Are you going to exile us all to this planet?" The other alien also looked at Miner angrily, as if waiting for him to explain his behavior in controlling the spaceship just now. Miner smiled lightly, glanced at the two of them, and said, "Banmu, Emery, why are you two so fierce? You should thank me now. This wandering planet is full of Zergs. If I hadn't sent the message urgently, you two would probably not have the chance to talk to me now. 4 of us went out, and now only 3 of us are back. This is already very lucky. If I hadn't teleported the spaceship away, I'm afraid everyone on the spaceship would have died here, Mina said coldly. Hearing Mina's words, Banmu and Emery suddenly showed strange eyes, and the eyes they looked at Mina were also different. The two looked at Mina like this, and looked at each other from time to time, and even had doubts on their faces. Mina was naturally very clear about the two people's behavior, because the current Mina was transformed by Li Ming, and Li Ming's words just now were completely based on his own personality, which was very different from the previous Mina, so it attracted the attention of the two. But Li Ming no longer cared about these things. He smiled and said, "Okay, it's enough to survive. You two can arrange the rest of the trip by yourselves." After saying this, Li Ming quickly left the main cabin. Banmu and Emery were stunned and looked at Li Ming leaving. Then the two looked at each other again, not knowing why. Li Ming left the main cabin and went directly back to his own cabin. Sitting quietly in the cabin, Li Ming was calm, but under his solemn expression, he was thinking about something else, because the information in Mina's consciousness was being absorbed by Li Ming bit by bit. This spaceship came from the Holmes galaxy in the Andromeda galaxy. The purpose of this trip was to search for special energy, and the spaceship had left the Andromeda galaxy for some time. There were 4 people in charge of this spaceship: Mina, Banmu, Emery, and another person who was captured by the alien insects on the wandering planet just now. The 4 people had equal positions and roamed the space to find planets that might have special energy, but Mina's consciousness did not explain in detail the use of special energy. Li Ming knew very little about the uses of special energy. Energy can be used to refine Loangdan. Mutation energy can cause biological species to mutate, and the 7-color crystal that Li Ming once obtained is still unknown for what purpose, but the uses of special energy are far more than these. Regarding special energy, Li Ming's cognition needs to be improved. Although Mina is an advanced civilization, his position is relatively low. Like Banmu Emery outside, he is a purchaser and is only responsible for collecting special energy for this galaxy. According to the time node in Mina's memory, it should be time to return now. Li Ming needs to dig deeper and digest more memories about Mina, and then decide whether to stay or go. Thinking in his mind, Mina's cognition began to integrate into Li Ming's mind. Li Ming did this here, and Banmu and Emery outside were still standing in front of the operating table with puzzled faces. "Emery, do you think that Mina is a little bit wrong?" Banmu's eyes rolled, full of doubts. Emery took a deep breath, nodded slightly, and said, "It's a bit strange indeed. Could it be that he was frightened by the alien insects?" Banmu nodded, doubting this statement. He turned and looked at the operating table. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Forget it. We have been traveling for quite a long time this time. Although we have encountered a lot of troubles, we have gained a lot. Let's return first. As for Mina's situation, we will discuss it after returning to the Holmes galaxy." Emery nodded and said no more. At this moment, in the distant universe, a supergiant spaceship was slowly approaching a large galaxy. This supergiant spaceship came from the Isaiah star in the Milky Way. In the main cabin of the spaceship, many people were busy, and in a corridor of the spaceship, Cottrell was walking step by step. The entire corridor was empty, without a single figure. Cottrell walked to the end before stopping. A black metal door blocked Cottrell's way, but just as Cottrell was about to raise his hand to do something, the metal door suddenly flickered and disappeared. Cottrell was startled, but immediately raised his mouth slightly, revealing a faint smile. From this door, he entered a cabin. As soon as he entered, the previous metal door returned to its original state, which was closed. The cabin was empty, and there seemed to be no one in it, but a few seconds later, a wave of light suddenly flashed by, like a transparent brush passing in front of him. After this light, the cabin that was originally empty suddenly had a meteorite table and a figure. An alien with a bear-like head sat in front of the meteorite table, with his back to Cottrell and a transparent bead in his right hand. It was Biggs. Cottrell smiled slightly and was about to step forward, but his body suddenly stiffened and he couldn't move at all, as if his body was squeezed in the middle by some extremely dense energy and couldn't move at all. This strange scene made Cottrell frown again. Biggs turned his back to him, and now he was facing him. The transparent bead in Biggs's hand showed the current cabin, and Cottrell was also in the bead. Biggs raised his eyes slightly, looked at him coldly, and said, "I don't welcome anyone here." As he spoke, the transparent bead suddenly lit up slightly, and Cottrell's figure tightened, as if he was oppressed by the energy around him. His armor and body were severely squeezed, and even the mask on his face made a squeak and cracked. This powerful aura and ability are indeed amazing. But Cottrell just turned his eyes slightly, looked at the changes on his body, smiled slightly, and said, "Is this a divine weapon?" Hearing this, Biggs immediately looked at him, and his facial expression immediately became serious. Suddenly, the oppressive energy became more dignified, as if he was going to make the other party suffer. The power of the artifact is self-evident. If it were an ordinary alien, he would have cried out in pain long ago. But Cottrell was relatively calm. The purple light on his body flashed, and the oppressive energy was directly pushed away. The scene was like the energy that had been generating high pressure was suddenly swallowed up. The purple light was like a bottomless pit, and the oppressive energy from all around continued to flow into it like a spring, without any oppressive force at all. The appearance of this phenomenon made Biggs' face change drastically. His brows suddenly frowned, and his eyes stared at Cottrell fiercely. But the next moment, the purple smoke on Cottrell's body suddenly became very strong, and the purple smoke turned into purple clouds, instantly filling the entire cabin. The appearance of the purple cloud reversed the situation. Biggs, who seemed to have an absolute advantage just now, suddenly became passive. The purple cloud floating around him was like a blade on his neck. He could take his life at any time. Cottrell's eyes were gentle, and under his mask was a faint smile. He said, "It seems that only in this way can you and I sit down and have a good chat." As he spoke, Cottrell's figure floated in the purple cloud, and he came to the table next to Biggs and slowly sat down. Biggs did not dare to act rashly. He looked at the purple clouds floating around cautiously, and finally his eyes stopped on Cottrell and said, "Commander of the Pegasus Galaxy, Cottrell." Hehe. Cottrell nodded and smiled, saying, "That's right, Mr. Biggs." Chapter 413, Sprague Planet. Cottrell's eyes lit up slightly, and he smiled, looking at Biggs, as if he was looking at a treasure. "I came to you without any ill intentions, just to help you," Cottrell said, his eyes still fixed on Biggs. Biggs looked back at him, raised his lips slightly, and looked at the purple clouds around his body, and said, "Is this how you help me?" Hehe. Cottrell smiled a few times, waved his right hand, and the purple cloud in the cabin disappeared and was taken into Cottrell's body. After doing this, Cottrell continued to look at Biggs and said, "From your eyes, I see your desire for power. If you want to become stronger, you need to find the right way. This is very important." Biggs listened with both ears, and after watching the purple cloud disappear, he gently clenched his right hand and put away the illusion. But he didn't say a word. Although he didn't say anything, the action of putting away the illusion proved that Biggs had recognized Cottrell. Cottrell was naturally very satisfied and continued, "Then let's talk about you first, Biggs. On the surface, you have aerospace civilization and the artifact illusion. No matter which one, your strength seems to be very strong. But digging deep into you, it seems that there is only the surface," Cottrell said slowly. This remark seemed to hit the nail on the head on the current state of Biggs' ability, which made Biggs' expression tense and his eyes changed when he looked at Cottrell. Although Biggs is an aerospace civilization, his overall strength has not been fully developed. Many powerful abilities can only be hidden in the body and are restricted by the environment. In addition, there is the artifact. Compared with Li Ming now, Biggs' understanding and use of the artifact is far from the same level, but both of them are limited by their own energy volume. It is impossible to fully display the power of the artifact, and even the basic ability of the artifact is difficult to be developed. Biggs naturally knew these two problems in his heart, but he didn't expect Cottrell to see them at a glance. Cottrell naturally noticed Biggs' eyes, as if this was exactly the look he needed. He smiled again and said, "Follow me, and when we get to Spragg, I will make you stronger." Biggs' brows tightened, and he looked at him intently, whispering, "Spragg." Cottrell nodded slightly and said, "The light of GOIE appeared on Spragg. You should know that Yi energy is a rare existence among special energies, so this time for Spragg, it is of great significance to us." Upon hearing the light of GOIE, Biggs' face changed drastically, and he looked nervous. After all, Yi energy is extremely powerful. Whenever there is a planet with the light of GOIE, there will inevitably be a powerful civilization. This is naturally something that people need to worry about. Biggs' eyes can't help but worry, and he said, "It's not that easy to obtain Yi energy." Cottrell smiled threateningly, nodded slightly, and said, "That's for sure." The appearance of the light of GOIE has attracted the attention of the three major galaxies in this galaxy group. Three major galaxies. Biggs was also surprised. Cottrell said calmly, "The largest galaxies in this galaxy group, Andromeda Galaxy, Milky Way, Triangulum Galaxy, these are the three largest galaxies in this galaxy group, and they are also the competitors of the light of GOIE this time. However, our chances of getting the light of GOIE are still very high. You don't have to worry, and I will definitely make you stronger." Cottrell even laughed strangely at the end. Hearing that laugh, Biggs' expression became gloomy. For Biggs, becoming stronger is his direction, and as for the purpose of Cottrell's doing this, Biggs doesn't care. While the two were talking, the headship where Li Ming was had been teleported to a far place. Li Ming had already fully mastered the cognition of Minor, and Li Ming was already practicing the ability of energy conversion. As for the destination of this ship, Li Ming didn't care at all. It didn't matter to Li Ming where to go. At this time, on the operating table in the main cabin, several tentacles suddenly shook slightly, and it was a message coming. Banmu and Emery, who had been near the operating table, suddenly looked excited. The two of them had naturally received the content of the message. After looking at each other, they all showed surprise. Not returning to the Andromeda Galaxy? Going directly to Spragg star? Banmu was the first to whisper in surprise. Emery also rolled his eyes and fell into deep thought, but he didn't say a word. Li Ming, who was in the cabin, naturally noticed the message, but still kept his eyes closed and didn't react at all. According to the information content received by the operating table, the original plan to return to the Andromeda Galaxy with materials has been temporarily changed to go to Spragg star. Spragg is now the planet at the forefront of the battlefield. This order means that all the special energy collected will be brought to the experimental institution on Spragg. From this information, it can be judged that the current frontier seems to be in great need of special energy supply. Banmu looked at the operating table for a while, then looked at the position of Li Ming's cabin. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Should we inform Minor about this matter?" After hearing this, Emery also looked at the cabin, where Li Ming was, but soon shook his head and said, "That's unnecessary. After all, this is the order of the Commander-in-Chief. It's useless to inform him. Besides, the itinerary has been handed over to you and me. It's enough for the two of us to decide." Banmu nodded slightly and said nothing more. With this irresistible order, the spacecraft can only change direction and go straight to Spragg. Spragg, located in the periphery of the Andromeda Galaxy, is the closest to the galaxy. It is a planet without a civilized star system. The exact location of the planet is a star system in the satellite galaxy of the Andromeda Galaxy. It's just that there are also large galaxies without civilization in this satellite galaxy. After all, not all large galaxies have life species, but these are also under observation by other galaxies. In addition to hiding themselves, civilized galaxies also peek at others, hoping not to be discovered, and also hoping to discover other worlds. Although contradictory, it is a fact. Spragg star has not been noticed by any alien life for a long time. It is just a very inconspicuous one among the many planets in the universe, but as time goes by, the planet suddenly has a strange phenomenon. The light of GOIE bursts out from it, which is like an object that has never been noticed by anyone. When it suddenly releases golden light one day, it will immediately be noticed by people. The three major galaxies in this galaxy group have shifted their attention here. Li Ming's cognition of Spragg star also comes entirely from Minor's consciousness. There are now a large number of alien troops and life stationed on Sprague's star, but the development of the light of GOIE has not yet begun. After all, the forces involved are extremely powerful, no less than an interstellar war, not to mention 3 large galaxies, which has almost risen to the level of galactic war. Li Ming only knew that the light of GOIE was a special energy, and he had no idea what it was used for. However, Li Ming's mind was not there for the time being, and he just wanted to practice with peace of mind. After a long transmission, the spaceship finally approached the galaxy where Sprague was located, but at this time, spaceships could be seen flying everywhere in the galaxy. There were all kinds of them, and they came from different galaxy civilizations, but the appearance of the spaceships had a unique energy logo, which was one of the ways to identify each other. At present, these spaceships all came from the Andromeda galaxy, and their purpose was exactly the same, coming to Sprague. At this time, Li Ming opened his eyes slightly, looked at the door of the cabin, and then stood up and walked out. Leaving the cabin and coming to the main cabin outside, Ban Mu and Emery were busy in front of the operating table, and the reason why Li Ming came out was that he found something strange. Before he really got close to Sprague, trouble came first. Several spaceships from the Triangulum galaxy appeared not far away. Chapter 414, Extreme Operation. Although Li Ming had been in his cabin, he was very clear about the situation outside. The spaceship not far away was preparing to attack this side. Li Ming took 2 quick steps with a serious look. He came to the operating table and waved his hand to push Ban Mu and Emery away. Before the two could do anything, Li Ming's right hand hit the operating table. Green light emerged from the center of his palm and spread to the entire operating table. Ban Mu didn't understand why. He looked at Li Ming's operation and couldn't help but scolded. "Minor, what are you doing?" Li Ming continued to focus on the operating table without looking back. He opened his mouth slightly and said, "Now the entire spaceship is controlled by me alone. If you want to live, just shut up." The green light on the palm was Li Ming's spiritual consciousness. Li Ming's operation was to completely combine his consciousness with the spaceship, making the spaceship a part of Li Ming's body, so as to achieve absolute control over the spaceship. After all, this spaceship was just a procurement spaceship, and it was naturally incomparable to a professional combat spaceship. Even if it had an energy shield, it could not withstand the opponent's attack. Under Li Ming's control, the spacecraft was fully powered. Teleportation was no longer realistic at this time. If you wanted to avoid the enemy, you could only rely on flying. There were several spacecraft from the Andromeda galaxy in the space not far from Li Ming's spacecraft, but it was obvious that they were facing exactly the same situation. The head spacecraft turned and accelerated away first, looking like it was going to escape. Seeing this, the spacecraft from the Triangulum galaxy would not stop. It also turned and sped away. At this time, several other Andromeda spacecraft also began to flee. Although the procurement spacecraft was not strong in combat power, its flight maneuverability was extraordinary. This was also a unique mechanism of this type of spacecraft. It was not made for combat, but only for escape. Under Li Ming's operation, the spacecraft flew quickly in the vacuum of the universe, with extreme speed and extreme maneuverability. The enemy behind him had naturally begun to lock onto Li Ming's spacecraft. Once locked, it would naturally be very dangerous. Li Ming naturally knew this, but this head spacecraft was not the small spacecraft that Li Ming had driven before, which could be locked instantly. The functions of large spacecraft are extremely powerful, and it is not easy to lock on. Ban Mu and Emery were also stunned by Li Ming's extreme operation. Originally, they were prejudiced against Li Ming's forced control of the spacecraft, but seeing Li Ming's amazing operation, they could only stare blankly and say nothing. While Li Ming was operating the spacecraft with all his strength, he also received some information about the battle situation in the galaxy. This information came from the commander's battle headquarters in Andromeda. According to the information, Andromeda has an absolute advantage in the current deployment of troops on Sprague. Similarly, in the space of Sprague, the Andromeda galaxy also has an advantage. Although Andromeda has advantages on Sprague, and in Sprague's space, there are great problems in logistics and energy supply. because at the edge of the galaxy far away from the space of Sprague, a large number of combat spacecraft are deployed. The purpose is to prevent the supply spacecraft from entering the space of Sprague. This is why the spacecraft that Li Ming was riding was suddenly arranged to enter Sprague instead of returning to the Andromeda galaxy as originally planned. Even the Andromeda spaceships we encountered just now were all here for supplies, but it was obvious that the key transmission points were controlled by the Triangulum galaxy, so it would not be easy to break through. According to this information, as long as we break through this layer of defense and enter the space near the Sprague star, it will be safer. After all, most of the space there is controlled by the Andromeda galaxy. It was precisely because of this that Li Ming tried his best to control the spaceship to move closer to that side. With Li Ming's control over the spaceship, this was naturally not comparable to that of ordinary opponents. After a series of rapid turns and flights, Li Ming drove the spaceship closer and closer to the Sprague star. Li Ming also sent a message to the commander's combat department through the console, hoping that the other party could send a combat spaceship to respond. After all, this was also crucial. There were a large number of meteorites floating in this galaxy, flying at an extremely fast speed. It was natural to avoid these meteorites. This was naturally not a difficult task for Li Ming, but it was not so easy for the enemies behind him. In the case of being unable to lock onto Li Ming, the opponent could only control the attack through operation, just like a rifle that fired bullets with a crusher, so the chance of hitting was naturally pitiful. After a flight, Li Ming drove the spaceship through a meteorite area and successfully got rid of the enemy with the help of this meteorite area. Seeing that the enemy did not continue to chase him, Li Ming smiled slightly and snorted disdainfully. Ban Mu and Emery had been on edge all the time, because Li Ming's operation was extremely thrilling every second. They had to avoid the spaceship behind them and the meteorites, which made people's hearts rise in their throats all the time. But after seeing Li Ming successfully get rid of the enemy, the two of them also breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, they were very close to the outer space of Sprague star, and they could even see the appearance of this grey planet. The appearance of Sprague star is somewhat like Jupiter, and there are even planetary belts on the outer edge of the planet, and this planet also has two satellites of its own. Overall, this planet is completely yellow-gray, like the color of Lois, and even the radar of the spacecraft cannot see the surface of the planet, because the atmosphere of the planet is a constantly flowing airflow and hurricane. Such a planet is very unsuitable for life to live and survive. This was different from what Li Ming had expected, but Li Ming had no intention of landing on this planet. It would be safest to enter the space station headquarters of the Andromeda galaxy at this time. But just as Li Ming was operating the spacecraft to enter the space orbit, a giant spacecraft was quietly approaching in the distance. Li Ming frowned when he saw the spacecraft for the first time. His eyes turned slightly, and he took a deep breath, thinking, this spacecraft looks so familiar. What is certain is that this spacecraft does not belong to the system of the Andromeda galaxy, nor to the system of the Triangulum galaxy, because Li Ming has seen these two types of spacecraft just now. Just as Li Ming was thinking about it, the giant spacecraft suddenly launched an attack on Li Ming, and beams of high-energy lasers immediately shot out. The sudden attack also startled Li Ming, and he did not dare to hesitate at all, and operated the spacecraft to prepare to leave this place. Facing the attack of beams of lasers, the spacecraft driven by Li Ming began to approach the Sprague star, but Li Ming did not know that the giant spacecraft had locked Li Ming's spacecraft. At the bottom of the giant spaceship, a cannon was already aimed at Li Ming's spaceship. The red light in the cannon was flashing, and electric arcs were jumping from time to time, which was completely different from ordinary high-energy lasers. Even if the target was locked, it would not be detected. Li Ming only focused on driving the spaceship to avoid attacks and prepare to enter Sprague directly. Li Ming did not want to enter the planet because the environment of the planet was harsh and very dangerous. He decided to enter at this moment because he had to avoid survival in a dangerous situation. Although Li Ming had tried his best to operate the spaceship to avoid attacks, under the extremely dense attack, there were still many energy beams hitting the spaceship, which could only be resisted by the spaceship's own energy shield. The opponent's attack intensity also determined the energy consumption of the spaceship shield. Every time it was attacked, a certain amount of spaceship energy would be consumed. Fortunately, the spaceship stored more energy, so this kind of attack could be withstood. But after a few seconds, the red cannon that had originally locked Li Ming's spaceship suddenly made a light whoosh sound, and a red beam with flashing arcs shot out. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the red beam directly hit Li Ming's spaceship. The attack directly penetrated the energy shield and hit the spaceship. The energy shield was useless in front of the attack. Boom. There was another loud noise, and the spaceship exploded. The entire spaceship was instantly dismembered in space. The wreckage fragments split apart, and the flames were mixed with energy waves that spread out in circles. Seeing the spaceship shattered in an instant, several high-level aliens in the main cabin of the giant spaceship smiled. These people were Sirius and Reynolds from the Milky Way. Looking at the fragments of the spaceship, Reynolds smiled slightly and said, "This time, the Triangulum Galaxy should be able to see our sincerity." Sirius also nodded slightly and said, "I believe the battle over there has already begun. We must take this opportunity to quickly land on the Sprague star." Reynolds nodded slightly, without saying a word, but his solemn eyes had already looked at the operating table. Chapter 415 Hurricane Vortex. The destruction and explosion of the spaceship was completely beyond Li Ming's expectations, because the energy shield of the spaceship was still there. According to Li Ming's cognition, few attacks could directly penetrate the shield. This sudden situation was really sudden. Li Ming's figure was also sent flying by the impact of the explosion, and the direction in which Li Ming was hit was exactly the direction of Sprague star. Quickly entering the atmosphere, Li Ming's body fell rapidly under the gravity of this planet. Li Ming's body was completely wrapped in golden mist, and there were a lot of golden light shields outside the mist. From a distance, it looked like a big golden egg falling from a high altitude. Once entering the atmosphere, it would disappear directly in the airflow of the planet, and even the monitoring system of the spaceship could not detect it. Of course, Li Ming was also angry at this time, and his tense expression had been gritting his teeth to endure. In the explosion of the spaceship just now, Li Ming's body was also affected. After all, this attack was beyond Li Ming's prediction. Compared with those aliens who died directly in the explosion, Li Ming was obviously lucky. Falling as fast as a meteor, such a fall would definitely lead to death. Li Ming needed to use enough energy to resist gravity, but the gravity of this planet seemed to be greater than that of all the planets Li Ming had seen before. Even if he used all his energy to resist, he could not stop the downward trend, which made Li Ming feel worried. If he really fell at this speed, he might really die. At this critical moment, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he thought of something. He suddenly waved his right hand, and the palm of his hand flashed blue light. Energy control. With a violent wave of his right hand, the hurricane around him suddenly became more intense under the blue light energy. Under Li Ming's control, the hurricane formed a huge vortex, using the reverse resistance to reduce the falling speed of the body. This was exactly what Li Ming was thinking at the moment. Under Li Ming's operation, a huge vortex airflow had begun to form under him. Hurricanes are astronomical phenomena that exist on Sprague. Wind energy itself is a kind of energy, and Li Ming's energy control is a control of external energy. Under Li Ming's operation, the hurricane vortex began to take shape. Li Ming opened his hands, and two groups of blue halos were constantly released from his hands, and the blue halos were constantly integrated into the hurricane vortex through his hands. In just a few seconds, a storm tens of kilometers long and wide has been formed. Such a huge storm is also the limit of Li Ming's energy control, and the impact range of such a large storm is also huge. Even in space, the appearance of this storm can be seen. The storm is Li Ming's energy field. Its powerful energy has effectively prevented Li Ming's downward momentum, and the entire air storm has also been noticed by the aliens on the land below. When approaching the ground, the wind force of the natural hurricane will be much weaker. At this time, right below the eye of the storm, many alien troops are building a base. The construction of the alien base is mainly to transport the finished buildings directly here, which is also the fastest way to build facilities on this planet. The base is still under construction, but with the appearance of the sky storm, the aliens below were startled, looked up at the sky, and each opened their eyes wide, showing horror. A large number of aliens stared at the sky blankly, and the whole person stood there stiffly, completely stunned. From the perspective of the ground, a huge vortex in the sky has already covered the sky and the sun, as if a huge vortex has appeared in the sky, as if the sky is about to be swallowed by the vortex. An alien of advanced civilization in the construction area looked up at the sky, his eyes wide open, his mouth slightly open, and whispered, "This is." The huge vortex is getting lower and lower, and at the same time, the impact on the ground is getting bigger and bigger. The buildings that have been placed began to shake slightly, and even the huge rocks on the ground began to shake slightly with the hurricane. The entire construction area covers an area of 5 or 6 kilometers in radius, which is also a medium-sized base, and it has been completed for 4/5. However, facing such a huge storm, this construction area will face a huge test. As the hurricane approaches the ground little by little, sand and rocks fly on the ground in an instant, and the entire base begins to change under this influence. The spaceship that was originally docked in the base slowly flew up. Of course, this kind of flying up is not artificially controlled, but the spaceship is pulled into the air little by the power of the hurricane. A few seconds later, the buildings, aliens, and everything on the ground flew into the air. The entire hurricane vortex was completely unrecognizable. From a distance, it looked like a yellow vortex spinning. No one dared to approach it easily, and it was impossible for those inside to break free. Everything around could only be pulled into it by the hurricane. However, such a huge hurricane vortex did not last too long. After only 5 or 6 seconds, the wind speed dropped sharply, and the hurricane disappeared, leaving only the objects that were swept into the sky. The entire area was blocked by sand and dust, like a sandstorm, and no objects could be seen. Far away from the hurricane, huge rocks and metal buildings fell to the ground one after another, as if they were thrown over by the hurricane. After a few more minutes, everything returned to normal, the sand and dust disappeared, and the site was restored, but the original 5 or 6 kilometers of construction area had been razed to the ground, and not even half of the building materials could be found, and the spacecraft and various equipment were gone. A hurricane made a base disappear directly. At this time, Li Ming walked out of the sandstorm, looked around, smiled, checked his body again, and said to himself, "Finally, I landed safely." But just as Li Ming was about to leave, he suddenly stepped on something soft, just like stepping on a human arm. Li Ming looked down and saw that it was indeed an alien's arm under his feet. Huh. Li Ming showed a puzzled look, then leaned over and grabbed the arm and pulled it. The alien buried in the sand was pulled out directly. This alien was still conscious and not dead. His appearance was somewhat similar to the Holmes alien before. The only difference was that this person had some black tentacles on his head, like hair. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and glanced at the other person's body. The alien had multiple injuries on his body, and they were all impact injuries. He was just unconscious at the moment and his life was not in danger. Looking at the alien lying on the ground, Li Ming couldn't help but look around, with a look of surprise on his face, and said to himself, judging from his consciousness, this was originally a base, which was just destroyed by the hurricane vortex. The hurricane vortex. Li Ming seemed to have thought of something, and immediately looked at the other party again, and said, "Fuck. Could it be my hurricane vortex just now?" Whispering in his mouth, Li Ming looked at the other party again, and his expression changed slightly. He hesitated for a few seconds, took a deep breath, turned his right hand, and a ball of green light flew out from his palm, and the green light rotated around his body. Although the alien was just unconscious, his injuries were serious. From Li Ming's wisdom, the alien's body should have been injured by the impact of rocks or hard objects in the hurricane. It takes a long time to completely heal, and Li Ming is just urgently treating the other party's injuries to prevent the other party from being in danger of life. Under the treatment of Li Ming's ghost key, the alien gradually woke up and looked at Li Ming with slightly opened eyes. The strange face of Li Ming startled him, but due to the injuries on his body, he could only look at Li Ming in fear. Seeing the other party wake up, Li Ming smiled slightly, retracted the green light in his right hand, stood up and left without saying a word. But just after taking a few steps, Li Ming suddenly stopped, turned his head slightly, looked at the other party again, frowned slightly, and whispered, "GUI light." From the other party's consciousness, Li Ming actually found information related to GUI light, which made Li Ming suddenly interested in this person again. After thinking for a while, Li Ming walked quickly into the distance. Chapter 416 Brother, can you please talk to me for a moment? Find a piece of metal debris, cut it into the size of a single bed with a lightsaber, then put the alien on it. Summon Walker, find a rope, let Walker pull this person, and start walking away. This person is called Bendine, and he belongs to the headquarters of the Andromeda Galaxy. He is a scientific and technological civilization, and one of the discoverers of the GUI light. At present, this base is prepared for the action of the GUI light. Regarding the GUI light, Li Ming also knows a lot through the information in Bendine's mind. The GUI light is a place where the Yi energy exists, and the Yi energy is a mysterious energy that is beyond the cognition of advanced civilizations. It is said that this energy is the product of a higher level of civilization and will appear randomly in various galaxy clusters. Since the records of this galaxy cluster have been kept, this thing will appear once every certain period of time, but the time interval is not fixed. Sometimes it is very long, sometimes it is short, and there is no pattern to find, but getting this energy will inevitably become more powerful. In Bendine's mind, there are research records about the GUI light, but as far as the records are concerned, almost no one has obtained this energy. As for where the energy comes from and why it appears, there is no trace of its origin. But it is basically certain that this Yi energy is definitely an extremely rare item, otherwise it would not have attracted the attention of the three major galaxies. Li Ming is somewhat interested in the GUI light in his heart, but in order to obtain Yi energy, in addition to competing with the three major galaxies, he must find a way to enter the GUI land. According to the records in Bendine's mind, entering the GUI land requires complicated things. Through the above comprehensive information, Li Ming learned that the GUI light is a place where Yi energy cannot be traced and appears randomly. Once Yi energy appears on a certain planet, the place where the energy appears will form GUI light. Only by entering it can it be possible to find Yi energy. GUI light covers a certain area, and the area will be covered by this light for a certain period of time. This light does not have substantial physical destructive power, but is only the refraction of energy, but any life entering it cannot resist it. Therefore, entering this GUI land is a very complicated matter. Bendine is one of the technological civilizations that studies how to enter the GUI land, but there is no accurate research result yet. Although there are no research results and methods to enter the GUI land, the battle to enter this area has already started. This is inevitable, because the personnel of the three parties are all working on the method of entry, but no one will allow whoever studies it first to enter. If the Andromeda Galaxy has no way to enter, but the Triangulum Galaxy and the Milky Way can, then the Andromeda Galaxy will inevitably launch a full-scale attack to completely control the GUI land and never let the other two parties succeed. The current battles between the three parties are all small fights and even some military frictions, so this also shows that the three parties do not have a method to enter. Since Bendine is one of the researchers, Li Ming naturally cannot kill this person, and he must save this person. In case the other party really studies it, Li Ming will also benefit. Thinking of this, Li Ming rescued him. In the wind and sand, Walker was like a cow pulling a cart, dragging the metal plate behind him, and Bendine lay on the metal plate motionless. Li Ming was walking in the front. After walking for a long time, Li Ming's footsteps suddenly stopped. He looked at the environment in front of him with his eyes and frowned tightly. In the distance in front of Li Ming, there was a mountain area. If he continued to walk forward, he would inevitably enter that area. Li Ming's goal was to send Bendine back to the base in the Andromeda Galaxy. There are many bases in the Andromeda Galaxy on this planet, but Bendine usually flies between various bases by spacecraft. Now that he has come to the ground, he has no memory of the exact location of any base. It is also the first time for Li Ming to come to this planet, so it is naturally more difficult to find its base. This is like finding a city on Earth. Not to mention walking at the moment. Even if you give it a car, it is not easy to find it overnight. What's more, this Sprague planet is several times larger than the Earth, so the chance of finding it is even lower. But waiting there is not a solution. Li Ming turned his head and looked at Walker and Bendine behind him. Finally, he said helplessly. I can only wrong you, Walker. Walker looked indifferent and said nothing. Li Ming then continued to walk straight ahead. Walking slowly in the desert, it took half a day until he reached the edge of the mountain range, but Li Ming did not stop and continued to walk deeper into the mountain range. In order to find the Andromeda base faster, Li Ming released the Azure Dragon, so that even if he walked in a straight line, the Azure Dragon also provided Li Ming with a lot of vision. There is also a day and night alternation on Sprague, but the length of time is determined by the rotation speed and revolution speed of the planet. From Li Ming's perception, its slow rotation lengthens the length of the day and night, and its revolution speed is not fast. Unknowingly, Li Ming has gone through 3 days and nights, but there is still no development. During these 3 days and nights, Li Ming healed the other party's injuries whenever he had time. Although it is unlikely to be completely cured, the other party's physical condition is obviously much better than before. Because he couldn't find the base, Li Ming was even a little discouraged. If he left the other person behind, it would be much better for Li Ming to fly away. However, he couldn't bear to leave him behind. The most important thing was that the other party might have mastered the method to enter the GUI land. Walking and stopping, his thoughts kept changing, and Li Ming had walked out of the entire mountain range unknowingly. After passing through this mountain range, there was a desert plain. Standing on the boulder at the mouth of the mountain range, he squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. Seeing this, Li Ming suddenly became energetic, his eyes widened a little, and his face changed slightly. In the distance of the desert, Li Ming did see a black area. Although the distance was far, Li Ming could clearly distinguish that those objects were not rocks, but buildings. Seeing this scene, Li Ming smiled and shook his head in disbelief and said to himself, "Finally found it." Excited, Li Ming jumped off the rock, waved his arm, and said, "Go Walker, the base is ahead." So saying, Li Ming walked quickly into the distance. Walker said nothing, got up and continued to follow Li Ming. The closer they got, the happier Li Ming looked. He was now completely sure that it was a base, and a military base. As he got closer, Li Ming could even see aircraft hovering over the construction area. However, when they were still a few kilometers away from the base, 3 aircraft flew from the construction area and headed straight for Li Ming. Seeing the aircraft coming, Li Ming also stopped and waited for the other party to arrive. But when those spacecrafts got closer, Li Ming frowned. The appearance and color of the 3 spacecrafts were no different, but there was a triangular logo on the top of the spacecraft. According to Li Ming's memory, the spacecrafts in the Andromeda galaxy did not have this kind of logo. Bundine, who had been lying on the metal plate, slowly sat up and stared at the flying vehicle. His face changed instantly. He shook his head and whispered, "This is the military base of the Triangulum galaxy. We have to leave here." Li Ming was relatively calm. After looking at Bundine behind him, he nodded slightly, smiled slightly, and said, "Yes, you are right, but the premise is that we need a larger spaceship, or a spacecraft." As he spoke, Li Ming's eyes returned to the spacecraft. The 3 spacecraft did not land after approaching. They were just observing at high altitude, as if to confirm some information. But Li Ming had long been tired of walking on land. He narrowed his eyes and immediately locked onto one of the spacecraft. His figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already next to the spacecraft, looking coldly at the alien in the cockpit, but the other party had not yet noticed Li Ming's location. He only saw the figure below disappear. Li Ming tapped the cockpit lightly with his hand and said, "Brother, can I borrow your spacecraft for a while?" Chapter 417 Energy Control. The alien in the aircraft turned his head and saw Li Ming suddenly appearing outside the cockpit. He opened his mouth in surprise and tried to fly the aircraft away with his hands. However, no matter how he operated, the aircraft did not move at all, as if it had lost control. The aliens in the other 2 aircraft were the same. They frantically operated the aircraft to leave, but no matter how they operated, the aircraft did not move at all and did not respond at all. Now the 3 aircrafts have been completely controlled by Li Ming's consciousness. Looking at the 3 people's flustered appearance, Li Ming smiled lightly, moved his body, returned to the ground, looked at Walker, then looked at Bundine, and said, "Through my friendly communication, they decided to lend us the aircraft. As he said this, the 3 aircrafts behind him had slowly landed, and the hatches opened automatically. But the 3 aliens were still confused, because the aircraft was no longer under their control at this time. The 3 aliens were all low-level soldiers. Sensing Li Ming's powerful strength, they also hurriedly got off the aircraft and turned around to run to the base. Li Ming ignored all this, took 2 steps forward, and came to Bendine, picked him up from the ground, and walked towards the aircraft. At this time, Bendine did not have the ability to fly the aircraft, but Li Ming still threw him in. Bendine looked at Li Ming in surprise. Just as he was about to do something, he felt a sharp pain in his body, and could only sit quietly as Li Ming said. Li Ming looked at the control panel of the aircraft, and a map was immediately displayed. "Where is your base?" Li Ming asked immediately. Bendine looked at the map in front of him, then shook his head slightly and said, "I don't know either." Li Ming paused after hearing this, and looked at the other party with his eyes slightly narrowed. Indeed, as the other party said, Bendine knew nothing about this. Li Ming shook his head helplessly, hesitated for a while, and turned to walk towards another aircraft. Sitting on the aircraft, and closing the hatch, Li Ming controlled the 3 aircraft with his consciousness, and flew straight into the distance. As the 3 aircrafts moved away, a spaceship several tens of meters long and wide flew out of the base. After the spaceship took off, the cannons on both sides glowed slightly, and 2 energy bombs were ready. With a light sound of Kai, the 2 beams went straight to Li Ming's aircraft. Li Ming naturally noticed the movement of the spaceship in advance, but he didn't expect the other party to suddenly attack. As soon as it appeared, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and operated the aircraft to land quickly. At this time, Bendine seemed to have noticed this. After looking at the control console, he said with some concern, "We are locked." The voice was weak, but full of worry. Li Ming directly controlled another unmanned aircraft to the back of Bendine's spaceship, intending to use that spaceship to help him block the attack. Bendine also noticed this immediately. His face changed slightly, and said, What are you going to do?" Li Ming didn't care at all, smiled slightly, and said, "As for me." As he spoke, Li Ming turned around, and headed straight for a huge rock. At this time, Bendine was in a spaceship in the sky, and there was another spaceship behind him, flying straight into the distance, while Li Ming deviated from Bendine's flight path, and turned to a huge rock not far away. 1 second later, a loud boom sounded, and the spaceship behind Bendine exploded directly, and Li Ming's spaceship below also hit the rock directly, also turning into flames and fragments. Bendine was safe, because the spaceship behind him helped him block the attack, but Bendine looked down with a worried look. The rock was full of flames and fragments of the aircraft, which made Bendine's face gloomy, but the aircraft under him made a sharp turn, and came to the top of the rock. Bendine's body was also swung, not knowing why, and when the aircraft stopped, it was facing the direction of the base. In the base, the spaceship was coming towards this side, not fast, and there were a large number of aircraft around the spaceship, and even on the ground there were a large number of robots, each holding weapons, and heading towards this side. At this time, Bendine wanted to operate the spacecraft with force, but his body was extremely stiff and somewhat uncontrollable. Just as he gritted his teeth and tried to operate it, the spacecraft gradually lowered its altitude and finally stopped on the rock. A figure flashed, and Li Ming suddenly appeared from the rock below in front of the aircraft. Seeing Li Ming again, Bendine smiled slightly. Li Ming also looked back at him and smiled slightly. But facing the troops in front, Bendine was still a little worried. The spacecraft in the distance did not continue to attack, but stopped in the air, but the surrounding aircraft swooshed through the air. The robots on the ground also continued to approach. At this time, in the main cabin of the spacecraft, an alien of level 1.2 civilization looked at the distance intently and said coldly, "Tell them to stop resisting, and they can stay alive." Several low-level soldiers immediately operated in front of the console after hearing this. Li Ming in the air soon received the information from the spacecraft, as clear as a broadcast. Li Ming looked calm, not taking those aircraft into consideration at all. He stared at the spaceship in the distance with his eyes, and directly replied with his powerful consciousness, "I like this spaceship." The high-level alien in the main cabin was suddenly startled when he heard this and immediately looked at Li Ming with his eyes fixed and said viciously with his lips slightly opened, "Destroy him." With an order, those aircraft fired directly at Li Ming. The attack method of the aircraft was similar to that of the armed helicopters on Earth. Although the firepower was insufficient, it was very dense. Moreover, the attacks of the aircraft were all high-energy lasers. Facing these attacks, Li Ming smiled slightly, pointed his right hand at the sky and waved it. A blue barrier formed in front of him, and those lasers were like bows and arrows, inserted into the blue barrier one by one. It was as if a huge shield in ancient times was full of enemy arrows. Anyone who saw this weird scene would be dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. Because high-energy lasers, such energy attacks, do not attack targets in a physical form, but in an energy form. After the energy hits the target, no matter what form the target takes, the energy laser will explode, causing a huge impact force. Materials such as rocks or ordinary aircraft will be shattered by the explosion of the energy. Even if it hits the energy shield and energy barrier, it will consume these energy defenses through its own energy explosion. But now this laser is fixed on Li Ming's blue barrier without changing its shape. It is still in the form of a beam and has not exploded, just like a dud. Duds may happen to attack weapons on Earth, but it is absolutely impossible to fall on energy weapons. The scene in front of them made the low-level soldiers in the aircraft stunned, and they opened their mouths wide, and the originally intensive attacks stopped. Even Bendine behind Li Ming opened his eyes wide and couldn't believe it. But Li Ming looked calm, looking at the energy laser on the blue barrier, and suddenly pushed hard with his right hand. The sound of whoosh 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 was heard, and those beams shot out directly from the blue barrier and went straight to those aircraft. The laser flashed rapidly in the air, and the original attack of the aircraft was returned in full force. Several of the aircraft exploded directly in the air, turning into fireballs and falling to the ground. After doing all this, Li Ming smiled and said to himself, "The energy control is indeed extraordinary. In this way, I'm invincible." Li Ming smiled with satisfaction and turned his eyes to look at the spaceship farther away. At this time, the advanced civilization alien in the spaceship was stunned, with an unbelievable look on his face, his mouth slightly open, and he couldn't believe what he had just seen. Despite this, the alien still showed a ferocious look and said, "Fire, destroy him." As soon as the voice fell, the cannon of the spaceship flashed again, and the high-energy laser was ready. The attack on the spaceship was naturally not comparable to that on the aircraft, and its attack intensity and destructive power were also extraordinary. Chapter 418. No one can stop it. Normal aliens, regardless of their civilization level, would find it almost impossible to contend with the attack of the spacecraft. Even if they could defend and dodge, they would be in a passive position. The speed and altitude of the spacecraft are incomparable to civilized creatures, and the attack is also a powerful high-energy laser. From any angle, it can completely defeat civilized creatures. However, the means and flexibility of advanced civilizations are their own advantages. As long as it is possible to get close to the spacecraft, it is not difficult to destroy it. Therefore, the game between the two does not have an absolute result, which needs to be determined by the position and environment. Swoosh. The sound rubbed through the air. The dazzling high-energy laser came straight to Li Ming. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and the blue halo in his right hand flashed again. He aimed at the high-energy laser and grabbed it hard. Bang. A muffled sound was heard, and the high-energy laser as thick as an arm was directly intercepted by Li Ming's blue light. Seeing Li Ming's move, Bendine couldn't help but close his eyes and turn his head to the side, because the high-energy laser will explode directly after encountering an obstacle, generating huge energy fluctuations. That power is not something that ordinary people can easily block. This power is different from the missiles in the human world. It is an absolute attack. Within a certain range, energy will be penetrated and radiated, which can be said to be devastating. Bendine's subconscious avoidance is normal, but 2 seconds later, Bendine's eyes slightly opened and looked at Li Ming in surprise. The high-energy laser did not explode, but was controlled by Li Ming's right hand in the palm of his hand. The blue light kept flashing. The high-energy laser of the spacecraft has been completely controlled by Li Ming, and cannot move at all. But Li Ming's expression was not relaxed. His slightly narrowed eyes were already tense, and his face was slightly solemn. Obviously, the high energy laser of this spacecraft is not easy to control. The advanced civilization in the spacecraft in the distance immediately paused, and the whole person was completely stunned. At this moment, Li Ming's eyes turned, and his sharp eyes suddenly turned to the spacecraft in the distance, and then his right hand pushed again. The high energy laser flew out of his hand and shot towards the spaceship along the same path. Bang! A violent sound was heard, and the entire spaceship was buzzing. The high energy laser directly turned into ripples on the surface of the spaceship, and was blocked by the energy shield of the spaceship. At this time, the interior of the spaceship had become quiet. The low-level soldiers did not say a word, and stayed in place, as if they were petrified, and the high-level civilization was also stunned and motionless. There is no doubt that Li Ming's action has refreshed their cognition. Similarly, this ability has also refreshed Li Ming's cognition of energy control. The feeling of controlling energy has given Li Ming an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Li Ming retracted his right hand, looked at his palm with his eyes, and uttered a low he sound, and said to himself, the feeling of energy control. It turns out that the training during this period has not been in vain. As he spoke, his palm gently clenched and turned into a fist. With a move, Li Ming slowly floated in the air, heading for the spaceship. As Li Ming moved, the aircraft behind him started up and moved slowly behind Li Ming. As soon as Li Ming moved, the aircraft that had not been shot down immediately avoided him and flew towards the base, while the robot troops on the ground also retreated. These robots were not complete robots, and their interiors were controlled by low-level aliens. Li Ming's performance also made these people tremble with fear and retreat. Facing a powerful existence like Li Ming, it is the safest choice to avoid him. His figure floated a little bit and slowly approached the spaceship. No one dared to attack Li Ming easily. Even the high-level alien in the spaceship could only tremble. After a moment, Li Ming's figure stopped in front of the spaceship, and his eyes looked at the spaceship in front of him with contempt. At this time, the high-level alien in the spaceship also looked outside through the operating console. After hesitating for a while, his eyes opened slightly, raised his hand and gently pointed at the cabin above his head, and suddenly a blue beam of light shone from the top. The beam of light completely enveloped the alien, and then with a muffled sound of bang, the alien disappeared in the cabin. The next moment, the alien had come to the top outside the spaceship. Seeing the strength of Li Ming's 1.3 level civilization, the alien's expression shrank, with a bit of surprise and a bit of disbelief in his eyes. He looked at Li Ming quietly without saying a word. As soon as Li Ming saw the other party, he immediately looked at him with his eyes. Under his turning eyes, his wisdom eye ability was also activated. He just took a rough look and smiled lightly. This person's name is Corey. He belongs to the Triangulum Galaxy and is the highest leader of this base. His purpose is similar to Bendine's, both of which are to investigate and study the GYE land. This made Li Ming interested at once. After glancing at Corey standing on the spacecraft, he went directly to the base. Seeing Li Ming heading straight for the base, Corey frowned tightly, hesitated for a moment, and flew over. Li Ming's eyes turned in the corner of his eyes, and he had already noticed Corey's figure, but he just smiled lightly and didn't care. Corey flew quickly and came to the front of Li Ming, blocking Li Ming's way. Li Ming smiled lightly at this, as if he was very satisfied with Corey. Corey was also startled when he saw Li Ming's smile. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Who are you? Do you want to start a war?" Li Ming smiled and said, "Start a war?" Li Ming looked at the other party, and the information in his mind was gradually perceived by Li Ming. At present, there has been no large-scale conflict or battle among the three major forces on the Sprague star. This is also a tacit understanding, or it can be said, that the top leaders of the three parties have had contact and reached a certain consensus. Curry is a member of the Triangulum System Command. He has the same position as Bendine in the Andromeda Galaxy. They both came to study the GYE land, but Bendine's base has been destroyed. The distance between the two bases is not far, otherwise Li Ming would not have come here on foot. This also shows that the GYE land may be nearby. Li Ming looked at Curry and smiled slightly, and replied, "I came here to study the GYE land. I don't belong to any force. You don't have to worry. As he said this, Li Ming's figure had drifted towards the direction of the base. But Corey was confused. He didn't know what Li Ming meant by what he said just now. However, facing a 1.3 level civilization, Corey could only hold back his thoughts. He stared at Li Ming with his eyes, not daring to make any rash moves. Li Ming only flew on his own and slowed down his flying speed when he arrived in the construction area. At this time, there were a large number of low-level soldiers in the construction area who were busy and didn't pay much attention to Li Ming's appearance. Li Ming turned his eyes and quickly locked onto a circular building in the construction area. The building was similar to a lollipop, with a sphere on the top and a straight line on the bottom. The whole was silver white. After taking a rough look, Li Ming flew away directly. According to the information obtained by Li Ming, although the Triangulum Galaxy discovered the GUI land later than the Andromeda Galaxy, its research data on the GUI land was much more than that of the Andromeda Galaxy, and these research data were also what Li Ming was curious about. Thinking in his mind, Li Ming's figure had already arrived above the circular building, and then slowly fell down. Corey watched Li Ming's actions with a puzzled expression in his eyes. After some thought, he followed him. Li Ming stood on the top of the circular building with his eyes slightly closed, and King Lang had already started to shuttle back and forth in the building. Li Ming had only one goal, to obtain the other party's research results, or the progress of the research. There were a large number of equipment in the building, and there was also an operating table. King Lang went straight to the operating table. As soon as he entered the operating table, all kinds of data and information poured into Li Ming's mind, and Li Ming just stood on the top of the building with his eyes closed and remained silent. Corey in the distance was looking at him in confusion. He didn't know Li Ming's origins, Li Ming's purpose, and Li Ming's identity. It was like a weirdo who suddenly appeared. After watching for a while, his brows slightly frowned. Corey slowly raised his arm and said to a blue light device on his wrist, "I'm Corey from base number 1, and I need support from the headquarters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 419. Two people gathered together. Li Ming's King Lang quickly obtained the research results of GUI Light. Similarly, Li Ming also noticed that Corey was calling for support from the headquarters not far away. He opened his eyes slightly, glanced at Corey, and flew over. Seeing Li Ming approaching him little by little, Corey's face suddenly became ugly, but he didn't say a word. His whole body was trembling, and he didn't dare to move at all. Li Ming's figure stopped in front of Corey. After a few seconds, there was a sudden darkness above his head, and a spaceship slowly flew over. This spaceship was the one Corey was riding just now. After the spaceship came to the sky, it slowly stopped. Li Ming looked up, then looked at Corey in front of him, and said, "Please go in." Corey was stunned for a moment, not knowing what was going on. After hesitating for a while, he suddenly asked, What do you mean?" Li Ming smiled and said nothing. He raised his hand and pointed it at the spaceship above his head. A blue beam of light shone down and enveloped Corey. After doing all this, the aircraft also flew over, and the hatch opened automatically. Li Ming pulled Bendine out of it, and then entered the beam of light together. A few seconds later, the three of them entered the main cabin of the spacecraft together. Li Ming placed Bendine in front of the operating table in the main cabin, and then said to Corey, "Sit down, Mr. Corey." Although this was his own spaceship, Corey was hesitant at the moment, not knowing whether to sit or stand, but his body still came to the operating table according to Li Ming's instructions. Li Ming didn't say much, glanced at the low-level soldiers in the main cabin, and said coldly, "You can leave here." These low-level soldiers didn't dare to stay at all. After hearing what Li Ming said, they immediately got up and left quickly. When there were only 3 people left in the main cabin, Li Ming came to the operating table and sat down slowly. At this time, the spaceship quickly flew away from the building area under the control of Li Ming's mental power. The spaceship continued to fly. Li Ming sat in front of the operating table without saying a word and gently tapped the operating table with his right hand. The Azure Dragon then flew out of his hand and entered the operating table. Suddenly, a blue light flashed, and the light on the operating table intertwined and woven, and a topographic map emerged. When this figure appeared, Bendine and Corey were stunned. The content of the pattern was nothing else but the research data on the GUI land. These data came from the base just now. Li Ming naturally saw the expressions of Bendine and Corey. After a slight smile, he said, "You two are both studying the GUI land. I originally had no interest in the GUI land, but it happened that I brought you two together, which made me change my mind. You can tell me what you need, and I can satisfy you, but I need to know the results of the research." Li Ming continued. Bendine said nothing, looking at the operating table for a while, and then at Li Ming, his mind turning, and he did not speak. But Corey looked unhappy, looked at the data on the operating table, and then at Li Ming, snorted, and then looked at Bendine opposite. "I will not cooperate with anyone," Corey said very firmly. This answer was not what Li Ming expected. Li Ming did not respond immediately, but quickly turned his eyes to Bendine. Bendine looked hesitant, shook his head slightly, and whispered, "Cooperation is based on the consensus reached by the top leaders, so." Li Ming nodded slightly, and said, "Yes, I understand. I basically understand what you two mean." As he said this, Li Ming suddenly stood up and said, "As far as I know, there are not many researchers on GUI light. Bendine from the Andromeda Galaxy, Curry from the Triangulum Galaxy, and Cottrell from the Milky Way. As for Cottrell, I know much more about it than the two of you. It is no exaggeration to say that, even if the two of you work together, you may not be able to complete it before Cottrell." Li Ming continued. Curry's face changed drastically when he heard this, and he looked at Li Ming with a bit of horror, and said, How do you know?" Bendine also turned his eyes to Li Ming. Li Ming smiled lightly, and quickly looked at Corey, and said, "As long as you know, I know. What you don't know, I also know. Then who are you? Which side are you on?" Bendine suddenly asked. Li Ming sat back in his seat, took a deep breath, and said, "The three major forces, the three major galaxies, have nothing to do with me. You don't need to know too much about me." At this point, Li Ming's eyes turned, looking at the operating table in front of him, and continued, "As long as you can cooperate and achieve results in the research of entering the GUI land, I will let you go." Corey's expression moved when he heard this, but soon his eyes sank, and he thought again. Bendine didn't seem strange, just looking at the data on the operating table in front of him. Li Ming waited for 2 seconds and continued, "No one else will know about your cooperation, and you can take your research results back to your own galaxy. Aren't you satisfied with this result? My patience is limited. Think about it carefully." Having said this, Li Ming suddenly stood up and left directly. Li Ming left the main cabin, but the entire spaceship was still under Li Ming's control. He operated the spaceship to fly in the wind and sand. On this planet, a large amount of wind and sand and unknown air currents would hinder the transmission of spaceship information. In other words, on this planet, communication would be subject to certain restrictions. Li Ming knew this before, because when in space, Li Ming could not use the spaceship to check the ground conditions of this planet. However, this restriction is not absolute. Some special technological products can still be transmitted, but they are also very rare. Li Ming drove the spaceship into a mountainous area with complex terrain. After landing the spaceship on the ground, Li Ming closed his eyes and rested in his cabin, waiting for the research results of the two. At this moment, in the largest base of the Andromeda Galaxy on Sprague, an alien in uniform was on the top of a building. The alien had dark gray skin and a J-like character on the back of his clothes. He looked into the distance and said, "Does the Queen know about Bendine?" A short alien standing behind him immediately bowed his head and replied, "Master Tizon, the Queen has not been informed yet, but the Commander-in-Chief may have heard about it." The alien named Tizon nodded slightly, hesitated for a moment, and said, "A strange hurricane caused a base to disappear. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Zuanfang, you should check this matter carefully. I need a satisfactory answer." The alien named Zuanfang immediately bowed his head and replied, "Yes." In addition, in a base in the Triangulum Galaxy, a burly alien has appeared in the circular building. This circular building, that looks like a lollipop, is the building where Li Ming obtained the data of GUI land before. At this time, the alien was serious and ugly, looking at the several low-level soldiers in front of him with great displeasure. The alien had a sturdy and huge body, a small pointed head, 2 ears that stood up high, and a red armor all over his body, which looked extremely dazzling. Corey was taken away just like that. Didn't you chase him? The alien shouted angrily with dissatisfaction. The angry voice made the low-level soldier shrink slightly, and dared not speak. The alien in red armor hummed in dissatisfaction and said, "From now on, carefully search all nearby areas and find Corey." The low-level soldiers trembled and quickly replied, "Yes, yes, we'll go now." After replying like this, they left the room. The alien in red armor still looked at the operating table in the room with dissatisfaction. However, Li Ming didn't know that the Andromeda Galaxy and the Triangulum Galaxy had already begun to investigate the affairs of Bindeen and Corey. In addition to these, a giant spaceship also slowly landed on the Sprague star. This giant spaceship came from the Milky Way. The 3 major forces gathered on the Sprague star, just like the eve of a storm, seemingly calm, but secretly, the waves were already surging. Chapter 420. Notice. The purpose of leaving Bindeen and Corey alone in the main cabin was to let them work out a way to enter the GUI land. Although Li Ming's idea was good, the result was always counterproductive. The two seemed to have no intention of researching, but they had many ideas in their minds. Simply put, the two did not operate or analyze the data on the light on the operating table, and everything remained in their minds. But just as the two were thinking about how to operate, but did not do it, the data on the operating table actually changed on its own. As long as they thought of something, the data on the operating table would change accordingly, as if it could sense their thoughts. As soon as Corey and Bindeen saw the change in the light on the operating table, they immediately shrank. The two looked at each other, not knowing why, and even a little at a loss. But as long as the two stopped thinking about the data, the light on the operating table would stop. This magical effect surprised the two, and they did not shy away from it, but just felt strange. Soon they began to stare at the operating table and think, and the operating table began to continue to change. These were naturally the effects of the Azure Dragon in the operating table. King Lan captured their consciousness and true thoughts, and then converted them, so the changes in front of him could appear. As their thoughts changed, Li Ming also knew more and more about the details of GUI land. The light of GUI land is the radiation from Yi energy. The appearance of Yi energy covers the light of GUI in a fixed area, and this light will make people have illusions, and stimulate spiritual consciousness. If there is no certain way to avoid the power of this light, then there will be no return, and they will be eroded by the light, and fall into endless illusions forever. According to the research of the two, Yi energy is a natural combination of light energy and dark energy. These two energies are like the sun and moon energies on the earth, but the environment in which the two energies appear is completely different, and the probability of overlap is very small. This is also what Li Ming is puzzled about. Of course, Bindeen and Corey have always been researchers of special energy. They have also guessed that this energy may not come from natural generation, but the synthesis of a higher level of civilization. But it is just a guess, and there is no basis. As for how Yi energy is formed, it needs to be answered after obtaining the energy. The two people's thoughts were basically the same. If they wanted to avoid the illusion radiation of the easy energy, they had to use other energies to resist it, and other special energies became their research objects. But the research results might not be easy to find. They needed to analyze various special energies in a complex way before they could get the results. Looking at these, Li Ming couldn't help but raise his hand and touch his chin. His eyes moved slightly, and he kept thinking about something in his mind. If the easy energy is an attack on the spiritual consciousness, can my wisdom eye directly resist this attack? Such an idea immediately popped up in Li Ming's mind. According to the research of the two people in the main cabin, Li Ming already had a preliminary understanding of the easy energy. Based on these understandings, Li Ming had such a bold idea. As for whether it is feasible, Li Ming has no way of knowing. Of course, Li Ming didn't need to take risks and try. The best way was to wait for the research results of the two people. While Li Ming was waiting, several huge spaceships were slowly approaching the sky above this mountain range. It was a spaceship from the Triangulum Galaxy. The spaceship was flying very slowly and carefully scanning everything on the ground. Although the ground could not be directly observed from space, it was still very effective to maintain a certain distance from the ground. At this altitude, the wind and sand were not strong, the airflow was stable, and the observation area was moderate. It was the best altitude for searching. Not only the spaceships from the Triangulum galaxy, but also the spaceships from the Andromeda galaxy began to search nearby. But at this moment, Li Ming still knew nothing about it and continued to wait for the results in his cabin. After a while, Li Ming's eyes suddenly opened, his brows slightly frowned, and the figure stood up directly from the cabin, frowning slightly. The searching spaceships were still far away from Li Ming, but there was a figure who had come to the top of the mountain near Li Ming's spaceship. This person was Zuan Fang, who was not tall, had a pair of big ears like a cat tail leaf fan, and was wearing light armor, quietly looking at the spaceship below. Li Ming was naturally aware of this person's appearance. Li Ming could even sense the other person's consciousness from the spaceship. This made Li Ming's face change slightly, and he whispered, "Spiritual civilization." As he spoke, Li Ming moved and walked towards the hatch. The surface of the spaceship flashed with blue light, like a flame burning a hole in the spaceship, and then a figure slowly emerged from the hole. It was Li Ming. Li Ming raised his head slightly and looked at the top of the mountain, while Zuan Fang on the top of the mountain also looked down. Zuan Fang 1.4 level civilization, second interval, looked at Li Ming with a cautious look, without any arrogance or disdain, as if he could see that Li Ming was different. Facing this advanced civilization in the second interval, Li Ming naturally did not dare to underestimate it, and his eyes were also fixed on the other party. After looking at each other for a few seconds, Li Ming's eyes suddenly narrowed, and his face instantly became ugly. Two figures flashed, and two more appeared on both sides of Zuan Fang's body. The key point was that these two people were also 1.4 level civilizations. As soon as the three aliens from the second interval appeared, Li Ming's face immediately darkened. The two new aliens were strong, and didn't even wear armor. As soon as they appeared, they turned their eyes to Li Ming. Zuan Fang's eyes turned and looked at the spaceship under Li Ming's feet, whispering, "Before the people from the Triangulum galaxy arrive, Dals will rescue Bendine, and Cheng Simu will deal with that guy. We are only here to take Bendine away. Don't make any trouble." "Yes," the two replied almost at the same time. As they said this, the strong alien named Cheng Simu suddenly jumped down and came directly above Li Ming's head. And the figure of Dals also disappeared on the spot with a shake. Seeing this scene, Li Ming didn't care about the spaceship at all. The figure suddenly jumped away from the spaceship and jumped into the distance. As soon as Li Ming left the spaceship, the top of the spaceship flickered slightly, and Dals' figure had emerged. During this process, Cheng Simu's eyes never left Li Ming, but he did not take action, just staring closely. After Dals landed on the top of the spaceship, he slowly raised his right hand and suddenly clenched his entire palm, turning it into a fist. The surface of the fist flickered and golden arcs jumped, which was extremely strange. The next second, the fist suddenly smashed down and hit the top of the spaceship. I saw golden light radiating from the fist. Boom. A loud noise was heard, and the entire spaceship exploded instantly. The earth and the surrounding rocks shook with it. Li Ming narrowed his eyes to see all of this, and his brows were slightly frowned. On the surface, it was Dals' punch that shattered the entire spaceship, but in Li Ming's eyes, the golden light released by Dals' punch avoided the main cabin. The shattering, flames, and explosions were all in other parts of the spaceship. There was nothing unusual in the main cabin in the middle. After the flames and smoke, the situation in the main cabin was clearly visible. The blue light on the console had disappeared. Kori quietly stood beside Bendine, with one hand on Bendine's shoulder. Bendine was sitting, but Kori was standing. Seeing this, Dals still floated in the air, but his eyes were fixed on Kori. "Let him go. I'll let you go," Dals said coldly. Kori's mouth slightly raised, and he smiled. "Let him go? It's not possible anymore." Upon hearing this, Dals' face suddenly became solemn, and his right fist had quietly clenched. Before Dals could do anything, a spaceship had quietly approached in the sky. This spaceship was from the Triangulum galaxy. The appearance of the spaceship attracted the attention of everyone present. Looking at the spaceship, Zuanfang, who was far away on the top of the mountain, also had a heavy face. After the spaceship reached a certain height, it slowly stopped, and then a beam of blue light shot out from the bottom of the spaceship. The blue light was like a searchlight, and in the light a man in red armor was slowly coming into this airspace. This man was none other than the general of the Triangulum Galaxy, Xiang Fei. Chapter 421, How to Enter. Xiang Fei's red figure descended little by little, until it was very close to Dal's. Xiang Fei was also a 1.4 level civilization, but it was obvious that among the same level, the aliens in the Andromeda Galaxy were quite afraid of him. After seeing Xiang Fei, Kori immediately showed a look of joy, holding Bendine tightly with one hand and slowly flying into the air. As the figure floated, Kori said, "Master Xiang Fei, I have mastered the method of entering the Gye land." As he said this, Kori's face even showed extreme excitement. That kind of excitement was like breaking through a major experiment, making people proud and proud from the bottom of their hearts. Xiang Fei's face changed slightly when he heard this, and his eyes widened a little. But at this moment, Zuanfang on the top of the mountain suddenly flew over slowly. Although he didn't say a word, his eyes were already fixed on Kori. It was his words just now that attracted Zuanfang's attention. But Li Ming was confused. Kori said that he had mastered the method to enter the Gye land, but Li Ming's King Lang did not find any information about this from his brain. Why? Just when Li Ming was puzzled, his eyes could not help but look at Bendine. A message came from his wise eyes. As soon as Li Ming received this message, his face changed slightly. In Bendine's brain, there was indeed an important message, and this message was unknown to Kori. Similarly, there was also a message in Kori's brain that Bendine did not know. Simply put, both of them were only one step away from cracking the method to enter the Gye land, but they kept this secret and did not tell each other. Once the two told each other their secrets, they could both get the method to enter the Gye land, but if they did not say it now, naturally no one would know it. Li Ming saw both pieces of information at this moment, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was equivalent to Li Ming mastering the secrets of the two people. After combining them, the method to enter the Gye land was naturally known to Li Ming. While looking at the two, Li Ming nodded slightly, whispering, "So, that's how it is." At this time, Kori had already tightly grasped Bendine, turned his head, and looked at Xiang Fei beside him, and said, "We must take this person away. He is very important for us to enter the Gye land." As he spoke, he held Bendine even tighter. Xiang Fei didn't have much expression on his face when he heard this, but it might not be so easy to take one person away from the three high-level officials, which made Xiang Fei a little hesitant. At this time, Zuanfang stared at Kori, occasionally looking at Bendine, and said, "Xiang Fei, what do you think we should do?" Xiang Fei hesitated to look at Kori and said, "Since you have mastered the method to enter the Gye land, let that guy go." Kori was shocked when he heard this, but he seemed to be a little helpless. After hesitating for a while, he let go and threw Bendine over. The current situation is already very clear. The other side has 3 high-level civilizations in the second interval, and Kori has only 1. Even if he doesn't want to let go, he can't do anything. Dals opened his arms and caught Bendine. Bendine had a complicated expression on his face. He looked at Kori coldly, but soon turned his eyes to look at Li Ming in the distance. After thinking for a while, he said, "If there is really someone who has mastered the method to enter the Gye land, it must be that person." As he spoke, Bendine's eyes had already turned to Li Ming in the distance. This look made the eyes of others turn over, but these people seemed to be confused. Even Kori didn't think too clearly at this moment. Bendine continued, "Kori and I have exchanged our research results with each other. We have complemented each other on many unsolved problems, but we both have our own tricks, so Kori and I are still one step away from really mastering the method to enter the Gye land. But that person is different. He has a very strong spiritual civilization ability. I believe the important information between Kori and me has been mastered by this person. And this person is the one who is very likely to really master the method to enter the Gye land." Bendine continued, his eyes already looking at Li Ming. After hearing this, Kori seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and his eyes quickly looked at Li Ming. Based on the abilities Li Ming had shown before, it was not difficult to infer that Li Ming had spiritual civilization, so Bendine's judgment of himself was also full of information. At this moment, the focus of the field has been concentrated on Li Ming, which made Li Ming's expression change drastically and look worried. His eyes turned slightly, and Li Ming's eyes finally stopped on Bendine, thinking to himself, it seems that there are some guys with clear ideas among the aliens. Whispering in his heart, Li Ming has begun to think about countermeasures. Hearing what Bendine said, Zuan Fang already showed a look of surprise, turned his eyes, looked at Li Ming in the distance, and said, Cheng Simu, take that person back too. Cheng Simu nodded vigorously, looked up at Li Ming, and moved his body to prepare to take action. But before the other party made any move, Li Ming immediately turned his body and flew straight to the distance, intending to escape from here. Cheng Simu noticed Li Ming's intention and jumped straight to Li Ming. It seemed that the other party just jumped easily, but the speed was amazingly fast. In almost a blink of an eye, Cheng Simu's strong body fell from the sky and landed in front of Li Ming. Boom. With a loud noise, Cheng Simu's figure just appeared, and the whole sky appeared strange. Cheng Simu seemed to have just jumped in front of Li Ming, but cracks appeared under his feet, as if the air was cracked. Go back with me obediently, kid. Cheng Simu said fiercely. Li Ming's brows suddenly frowned, and his eyes looked at the other party with a cautious look. Cheng Simu finished his words, and his body moved. A big hand had already grabbed Li Ming. After all, he was a second zone existence, and he naturally didn't take the first zone civilization seriously. This big hand was ready to take Li Ming down. Before the big hand got close, Li Ming hit back with a punch in the air. It seemed that the punch hit the air, but in the distance, a fist formed by high pressure airflow was already heading towards Cheng Simu's palm. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and Cheng Simu's figure suddenly swung, as if his entire right hand was pushed by someone, and he stepped back several steps. As soon as this scene appeared, the other people around looked at Li Ming again. After all, a 1.3 level civilization could not possibly fight against the second interval, let alone resist its attack. Cheng Simu's eyes widened a little, and he began to re-examine Li Ming. Li Ming was calm, looking at Cheng Simu, and quickly glanced at the others, and said, Bendine and Kori both know how to enter the GUI land. The two are only one step away. If you don't want to exchange your secrets, then I will tell you. As soon as these words came out, Cheng Simu, who was about to attack again, suddenly paused. But Zuan Fang in the distance, turned his eyes slightly, and after a little thought, he said, the fewer people who know the method to enter the GUI land, the better. Whether you tell it or not, we don't allow it. Li Ming was suddenly stunned when he heard this, and his face changed drastically. He quickly looked at Bendine. At this time, Bendine also looked at Li Ming coldly, as if the past few days of getting along did not create any ties between the two, and everything was still as cold water. At this time, Xiang Fei also turned his eyes to Li Ming, and said in the same way, no matter which side you belong to, the method to enter the GUI land is an absolute secret, and no one wants it to spread. Hearing these people's words, Li Ming's face suddenly changed, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. After looking at these people again, he laughed a few times and said, what you said is really reasonable. If this is the case, then we should avoid the possibility of more people knowing it. Chapter 422 Anger. Instant light slash. Li Ming's figure blurred and disappeared. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already beside Bendine. However, Li Ming did not kill him at once, but grabbed the other's neck. That posture was like grabbing a chicken. As long as Li Ming exerted force, the other would die. His figure was still in the air, and his right hand stretched straight out to pinch Bendine's neck. His eyes looked at the others coldly, and his mouth opened slightly. I have a bad temper. I respect you 3 feet, hoping that you will return 1 foot, but now it seems that I'm still thinking too much. At this time, everyone looked at Li Ming, because they all knew that once Bendine died, the method of entering the GUI land would really be unknown. Bendine struggled slightly in Li Ming's hand, and sometimes looked at Li Ming with horror, but Li Ming ignored him at all. After saying that, Li Ming's right hand suddenly moved. The movement was very light, just like breaking a small stick with the thumb, and with just such a light move, Bendin's neck made a squeak sound, and he had become a corpse, killing their tribesmen in front of the 3-second zone beings. This action invisibly angered these people completely, and Li Ming also noticed the anger of these people, but Li Ming just hummed lightly, and his right hand had loosened, and Bendin's body fell straight down. After doing this, Li Ming turned his eyes again, and looked at Kori. When Kori was stared at by Li Ming, his body shrank, as if he realized something, and the expression on his face twitched slightly. Xiang Fei seemed to have noticed something, and waved his right hand, and a red light stretched out from his arm. The red light quickly spread, and turned into two spherical shields, wrapping up Kori and Xiang Fei. Despite this, Li Ming still flew up, and went straight to Kori. However, this time Li Ming's intention had been noticed by Xiang Fei in advance. He aimed his right hand at Li Ming, and slapped the air. With a muffled sound of bang, a red energy ball shot out from his palm. Before the ball got close, Li Ming's figure flashed in the air again and disappeared. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already beside Kelly. In Li Ming's hand, there was an extra lightsaber, which directly cut through Xiang Fei's red energy shield, and killed Kelly. The appearance of this scene once again made everyone's face change drastically. Because these people have never seen a civilization in the first interval have such a sharp method, killing people in front of them is like taking something out of a bag, without any impact. Li Ming slowly stood up, smiled slightly with satisfaction, and said, "Now, there is finally only one person left who knows how to enter the GUI land." Although Li Ming is only at the first interval civilization level, his overall strength is already very strong, and he is not weak at all when facing the second interval. Even with the ability of instant light slash, Li Ming can use it continuously for 1.5 times. The so-called 1.5 is the limit of Li Ming's use distance. In the past, Li Ming used this ability, and he had to wait for a period of time before he could continue to use it. Now, after using it once, he can use it again, but the distance will be limited. This is why Li Ming needed to fly close to the opponent to kill Kori just now. Xiang Fei did not move, but his eyes had already looked at Li Ming. His two palms slowly clenched into fists, and his whole body flashed red light, as if the surface of his body suddenly burned with red flames. Even when he looked at Li Ming, his eyes flashed a little red light, and his lips occasionally showed his teeth. The anger in his heart could no longer be suppressed. Not only Xiang Fei, but Cheng Simu and Dals on the side also rose sharply in anger, intending to kill Li Ming. Zuan Fang seemed normal, as if he didn't care too much about Bendin's death. While looking at Li Ming, he spread his hands to both sides, and that action was to signal Cheng Simu and Dals not to act rashly. Zuan Fang looked at Li Ming with a calm and firm expression. He was thinking in his mind, and said to himself, "As I felt, this person's strength is extraordinary. Moreover, if he is the only one who knows how to enter the GUI land." Zuan Fang was thinking to himself when Xiang Fei in the distance suddenly moved and launched an attack. A giant red figure flashed through the air. Li Ming's eyebrows tightened, and he rushed forward without showing any weakness. At this time, Li Ming's body was full of blue light. He was not weak at all in the face of Xiang Fei. As soon as the two bodies touched, huge energy ripples spread out. As long as the two collided, the energy ripples spread out in the air, like rippling water ripples. These circles of ripples did not spread as quickly as shock waves, but were really like the surface of water, extremely slow. Although it was very slow, the energy in the ripples was still surprising. The red and blue colors kept interweaving and colliding in the air, and for a while, they were evenly matched. Zuan Fang looked at these, his face darkened slightly, his eyes moved back and forth between Li Ming and Xiang Fei. After a moment, he looked at Dals beside him, and whispered, "Xiang Fei is in your hands." Dals was startled at first, but soon understood. His eyes quickly locked on Xiang Fei in the distance, and he flew over directly. At this moment, Li Ming and Xiang Fei were still fighting. With no winner, Dals's white figure suddenly fell from the sky, and a huge phantom fist also smashed directly towards the two of them. Li Ming and Xiang Fei naturally noticed the phantom fist at the same time. They raised their eyes slightly, looked at the sky, and jumped back to avoid the edge of the fist. the huge white phantom fist fell from between the two people like a white meteor. Boom. With a loud bang, the fist hit the ground directly, the earth trembled, and sand and rocks flew everywhere, as if a bomb had exploded on the ground. At this time, Dals had appeared between Li Ming and Xiang Fei. Xiang Fei's face changed immediately, and he looked at Dals fiercely, but after just glancing at him, his eyes immediately turned to Zuan Fang and said, "Zuan Fang, what do you mean by this?" Zuan Fang's mouth twitched slightly, and he said, "This person is now the only one who knows how to enter the Jiwei land. Don't you understand yet?" Xiang Fei seemed to react suddenly after hearing this, and his eyes immediately looked at Li Ming. Li Ming understood at this moment that without him, it would take a long time for these people to enter the Jiwei land. After Zuan Fang finished speaking, his eyes immediately returned to Li Ming and said, "Now is the best time for you to make a decision. Whether you live or die, you decide for yourself." Li Ming naturally understood what the other party meant, but Li Ming dared to kill Curry and Bendine in front of them, which showed that Li Ming had a strong understanding of his own strength. After all, he was in existence with 2 6-domain maxing stars. But if there was a choice, Li Ming would still be willing to avoid fighting. After all, it was still difficult for him to face 4-second interval existences alone. After thinking for a while, Li Ming looked at Zuan Fang again. Without saying a word, just a glance, the two of them understood each other and smiled at each other, as if they had understood each other's meaning. Zuan Fang looked at Cheng Simu and said, "We'll go first, and the rest will be left to you." As he said this, Zuan Fang flew away directly. Li Ming hesitated for a moment and followed Zuan Fang. In this way, only Xiang Fei and Cheng Simu were left on the battlefield. Dals, who had previously opened the battle, also followed Zuan Fang and left. Xiang Fei looked at Cheng Simu, and the desire to fight was immediately suppressed. The red light on his body faded, and his eyes looked at the figure leaving in the distance, and finally looked at Cheng Simu again. Cheng Simu's strong body blocked Xiang Fei's body motionlessly, but the two seemed to be very familiar with each other, so there was no intention of fighting. Xiang Fei couldn't help but snorted and turned to his spaceship. At this time, Zuan Fang had brought Li Ming to the depths of the mountains, and a spaceship soon appeared in front of them. The spaceship was not big, more than 30 meters long, and it was lying in an arc at low altitude. The top of the spaceship was silver, the bottom was black, and the surface was smooth, giving people a strong sense of science fiction. Zuan Fang gently tapped the spaceship, and a portal appeared on the side of the spaceship. This portal did not come from the hull of the spaceship, but from the air several meters away from the spaceship. Chapter 423 Emergency. Zuan Fang was the first to enter the portal. Li Ming hesitated for a moment and followed closely. After Dals entered, the portal disappeared in the air after a rotation. The spaceship slowly rose into the air and suddenly stopped after reaching a certain height. Then, with a whoosh, it was like a light spot was suddenly pulled into a light, and it disappeared in a flash. This was not teleportation, but just flying. After a moment, the spaceship hummed and stopped again. At this time, it was already above the construction area. The portal opened again from the side of the spaceship. Zuan Fang and others flew out slowly. As soon as they left the spaceship, Zuan Fang said to Dals behind him, "You arrange a place for Li Ming to stay first. I need to go to the headquarters." "Yes." Dals nodded and returned immediately. But Zuan Fang did not leave directly. Instead, he smiled and looked at Li Ming and said, "This is a base on the front line. Dals will arrange a place for you to stay. I will be back soon." Li Ming nodded gently without saying a word. Zuan Fang then turned around and returned to the spaceship through the portal. The spaceship at this time, with a whoosh sound, cut through the sky and disappeared. This kind of high-tech spaceship was naturally something Li Ming had never seen before. The speed of the flight made Li Ming dumbfounded and full of curiosity. Next, Li Ming was arranged to a separate building under the leadership of Dals. Li Ming was quite surprised about the current situation of this frontier base. Since this is the frontier position, it is the place closest to the Jiwei land and the place where friction and fighting are most likely to occur, but the humanistic environment here does not have that kind of atmosphere at all. There are fixed soldiers inside the base, and these soldiers are also majestically guarding their posts, but the warriors of the advanced civilization in the base do not seem to be so nervous. They are either lying leisurely on the aircraft or chatting with some soldiers. This weird scene made Li Ming unable to understand it. Li Ming, who was arranged in a square building, has been looking out the window. The buildings here are all finished silver metal buildings. The so-called windows are also technological products. That is, a hole similar to a portal appears on the original wall. Li Ming can adjust the size of the window at will, but compared to these, Li Ming is still attracted by the scene in the building area. According to Li Ming's previous cognition, the existence of advanced civilizations rarely communicates with low-level civilizations, because the cognition of the two is completely different, and not at the same level. It's like Einstein and the human world communicating with a newborn child. But despite this, there are still many advanced civilizations and those low-level civilizations constantly joking and chatting, and sometimes bursts of laughter. It is not impossible to communicate with low-level civilizations, but for advanced civilizations, you can't get anything here in low-level civilizations. You can only waste time. If you can really get something, it may be what Li Ming is seeing now. In addition, there are some advanced civilizations drinking something in a flat place. This naturally attracted Li Ming's attention, because in terms of the energy of the body of civilized creatures, they will choose pure light energy. This energy gives life power and allows life to gain strength. There is no energy more suitable for the body than this energy. However, if you eat or drink something to replenish energy, it will definitely be more trouble than gain, because no matter what you eat or drink, it will burden the body while absorbing energy, which will shorten the original energy or lifespan. But Li Ming saw such an existence in this place, so he felt strange. The pictures he saw in his eyes were all things that Li Ming had never seen in any galaxy civilization. If he had to say that he had seen it, it would only be Li Ming's home planet, the Earth. But this is a place of advanced civilization after all. How could this happen? Looking at it, Li Ming smiled, and his body and mind actually relaxed with the surrounding environment, as if he had been immersed in this picture. Unknowingly, the sky dimmed and night fell. In a super large base on Sprague star, a small spaceship slowly flew through the air. In this huge base, the lights were bright, and various spaceships kept flying through the air, but this small spaceship was the only one that was particularly special. It was disc-shaped, silver, more than 10 meters long and wide, and not big. It was also out of tune with the surrounding spaceships. After shuttling through the construction area, the silver spaceship finally arrived at the top of a building. In this endless construction area, although this building is not the tallest, it is also a more conspicuous one in the nearby area. There is a semicircular hatch on the top of the building. When the spaceship approaches, the hatch will open automatically. The small silver spaceship came to the sky, emitting a blue beam of light, and then 3 figures slowly fell from the beam of light. These 3 people are Reynolds, Sirius and Cottrell from the Milky Way. There is also an alien in blue armor on the top of the building to greet the 3 people. This alien in blue armor is very special, with dark green skin like an elf, long ears extending to both sides of the head, and a blue hat on the top of the head. This armor and hat are like a general, mighty and domineering, and this person is the military advisor of the Triangulum Galaxy, Takuchi Philo. As soon as the 3 landed, Takuchi Philo immediately greeted them with a smile. Reynolds, who was walking in front, also raised his hand and saluted. It seemed that the 2 sides had already arranged it, so they went directly into the building without saying much. In a spacious conference room, Takuchi Philo and the 3 sat around the table. As soon as they sat down, Reynolds spoke first. "Why did you call us here so urgently? Is there something important?" Takuchi Philo nodded slightly and replied, "Something unexpected did happen just now. The reason why you were called here is because this matter is very urgent." "Oh." Reynolds' face changed slightly when he heard that it was an emergency. Not only Reynolds, but also Sirius turned his eyes to Takuchi Philo, but only Cottrell was relatively calm, as if even if something big happened, it was not a big deal in his eyes. Takuchi Philo then waved his right hand, and a blue light shot out from his hand and spread slightly on the table, like ripples on the water. Then the blue light woven and intertwined, and a topographic map emerged. While looking at the map, Philo said, "This is the frontier position of our Triangulum Galaxy. Corey, who is responsible for studying the GUI land, has been stationed here. Our original plan was to wait for you to arrive and study the data together and develop a method to enter the GUI land. But now the situation has changed, Zufilo said after a slight sigh. Upon hearing the change, Reynolds and Sirius looked at each other. Among them, Cottrell blinked slightly, his expression became solemn, and he seemed to be very concerned about it. Zufilo then continued, just now, General Xiang Fizin from the frontier sent me a detailed report. This report pointed out that an alien from outside the three major galaxies kidnapped Korean Bendine from the Andromeda Galaxy. Bendine is the person in charge of the development of the GUI land in the Andromeda Galaxy. This alien kidnapped the two and obtained the method to enter the GUI land and then killed the two, making things complicated. Zufilo said very seriously, with a slightly sad face. This news was not good news for Reynolds and others, so their faces looked a little ugly, mixed with some doubts. Zufilo continued, according to the report, this alien should have surrendered to the Andromeda Galaxy. This means that the Andromeda Galaxy may have mastered the method of entering the GUI land. Hearing this, Sirius turned his head slightly and looked at Reynolds. Reynolds looked solemn and said, then, the military advisor asked us to come here. Zufilo raised his eyes, looked at the three people in front of him, and said, the reason why I called you here is to deal with this matter urgently. Chapter 424 Tourist Gabby. Reynolds was serious and gloomy, and he attached great importance to this moment. After all, this was the ultimate goal of this trip, and there must be no mistakes. Whatever plan the military advisor has, just tell me, Reynolds said slowly. Zufilo seemed to be waiting for this sentence, and hurriedly pointed at the table again. At this time, the blue light suddenly changed, and another pattern appeared in the chaotic interweaving. Looking at the map in front of him, Zufilo said, this is the frontier base of the Andromeda Galaxy. According to our intelligence, the alien is likely to be sent here, so my plan is that your Milky Way troops are responsible for besieging this base, and our Triangulum Galaxy's road team is responsible for blocking the reinforcement of the Andromeda Galaxy's troops. We don't know how long the alien will stay here, so this matter needs to be decided as soon as possible, Zufilo said firmly. Reynolds hesitated after hearing this, and looked at Sirius beside him when his eyes turned. Sirius was also in hesitation. After all, this was a decision on war, and he needed to be extremely careful. Just as the two were hesitating, Zufilo suddenly smiled and said, in addition to this plan, we have a backup plan. Before you came here, according to the agreement between us, our researchers and your researchers jointly developed a method to enter the GUI land. Now that our Kori has died, there is no talk of joint development, but we can jointly develop. We will provide Kora's previous research data and base to your researchers. Once there are results, we can share them. Zufilo continued. Reynolds heard this, and looked at Cottrell this time, because the researcher on this trip was Cottrell. Cottrell smiled confidently, nodded slightly, and said nothing. Seeing this, Reynolds also nodded slightly. Takegofilo then revealed a satisfied smile and said, in this way, whether it is the plan to occupy the base or the plan for research results, as long as one of them is successful, it will be a victory for us. Reynolds no longer hesitated and replied, okay, let's do it. At this time, Cottrell suddenly raised his hand slightly, looked at Takegofilo, and said, I have a question that I want the military advisor to answer. I wonder if the military advisor can agree. Cottrell's sudden words startled Reynolds and Sirius, but the two didn't know what Cottrell wanted to say. However, Zufilo turned his eyes to Cottrell and said, as long as it is about this plan, I will tell you everything I know. Cottrell laughed and said, just now I mentioned an alien from outside the three major galaxies. I'm somewhat interested in this alien. Do we have any information about this person? Zufilo smiled lightly and replied, such an important person naturally needs his information. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and the blue light on the table intertwined and changed. The blue light beams were like soft lines, rotating and flipping, and a human figure pattern was drawn on the table. This human figure pattern was Li Ming. When Li Ming appeared, Reynolds and Sirius opened their mouths in surprise, and sometimes looked at each other. Although Cottrell was also surprised, he did not show the shock in his heart too obviously, but just looked at the pattern quietly with his eyes. The three people's appearance was naturally noticed by Takeuchi Philo. He looked at the three people and asked in confusion, "Do you know this person?" Reynolds nodded slightly and replied, "Of course I know him. This guy is a wanted criminal in our galaxy. I didn't expect him to appear on the Sprague star." When this person was mentioned, Reynolds and Sirius hated him, but they were still a little scared when they thought of Li Ming's elemental summoning. Sirius immediately said, "Although this person is a 1.3 level civilization in the first interval, his strength has exceeded that of an ordinary second interval civilization. If you want to capture or kill this person alive, even the advanced civilization in the second interval must send out at least 3 people." Oh. Takuchi Filo was a little shocked and showed an incredible expression. Reynolds nodded seriously and said, "This person is very powerful. If he has mastered the method to enter the GUI land, it will be difficult to deal with." Zufilo took a deep breath. If he heard Reynolds and Sirius say this for no reason, Zufilo would definitely not believe it, but Zhang Fen's report did mention that this person was very powerful. Obviously, this guy really has some means. After thinking for a moment, Zufilo continued, "Since this person is extraordinary, and you know him so well, do you have any good ideas?" Sirius thought for a while. Reynolds looked at Zufilo, then at Sirius, and finally said, "There is no definite method, but if we can add more advanced civilizations in the second zone, it may not be difficult to capture this person." Zufilo seemed to understand the meaning of this. After nodding slightly, his eyes moved slightly in his eye sockets. After hesitating for a moment, he replied, "Okay, if that's the case, then we will send more people from the Triangulum Galaxy to work together with your Milky Way. Of course, it would be best if we can capture this person alive. If we can't capture him alive, killing him is also a good choice," Zufilo said fiercely. Reynolds smiled and replied, "If that's the case, then there will probably be no problem with this matter." Zufilo nodded and said, "Since we are here, let's discuss the details of this trip." They began to discuss the details of the plan, while Li Ming walked back and forth on the streets of the construction area. The buildings here are not all sci-fi buildings. Some are ancient brick and tile streets, some are jungle-like buildings, and some are rock-like buildings. The entire building area has various styles. The area where Li Ming walked was the brick and tile area, because the ancient architectural style here is very similar to his home planet, which makes people linger. Every building, every brick and tile, and every street and alley brought Li Ming deeply into it, making people fascinated and unable to extricate themselves. "Why? Do you like it here too?" A young man's voice sounded in his ears. Upon hearing this voice, Li Ming immediately turned his eyes to a brick and tile roof. An alien in full silver armor was half lying on the top, holding a square metal box in one hand, constantly putting the liquid inside into his mouth, as if he was drinking. This person is a 1.4 level civilization, with white skin and facial features like an elf in the jungle, long ears, and a delicate face. He is close to humans, but not humans, but his appearance is more beautiful than humans. Looking at the other party, Li Ming chuckled, floated up, and stopped after reaching the roof. He said, "The things here can evoke my past memories, so I stopped to take a few more glances." Hehe. The white elf smiled faintly and said, "Every scene here is what I recorded when I was traveling in this galaxy group. So, wherever you arrange me, Gabby, I will bring these beautiful things there." While speaking, the man who called himself Gabby took a few sips of the liquid in the metal box. Li Ming watched without saying anything, but seeing that the other party had a strange association in his mind, he smiled slightly, leaned over and sat down, and said, "So, you must have been to many places, and seen many civilizations." Hearing this, Gabby laughed again and said, "That's natural. Traveling in the universe is such a wonderful journey. It is much more interesting than fighting here. To live, you must look for more interesting things, just like I discovered so many civilized worlds, just like the starry sky of the universe. As you look at it, you will imagine yourself arriving on that star." Gabby continued. Hearing this, Li Ming couldn't help but look up at the starry sky, and a slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chapter 425 Beginning. I'm a person who is obsessed with my hometown. When I'm away for a long time, I will miss my hometown, Gabby said, leaning back and lying on the roof. Li Ming looked at the other person's expression, and his eyes couldn't help but look around. The completely different architectural styles were like ancient villages, and he said, "Is your hometown here?" Hearing this, Gabby smiled gently, patted his chest with his hand, pointed to his head, and said, "Hometown is in my heart, in my memory, not in reality. No matter where you were born, it is impossible to find that memory again. Running around, the obsession in your heart has never changed." Gabby continued to speak, staring at the sky with his eyes, but the airflow in the sky constantly blocked the starry sky, making those bright stars appear and disappear from time to time. Li Ming looked at the other person quietly, with a faint smile on his lips. As the other person said, "Hometown is just an obsession, a place deep in the heart. It does not exist." Thinking back to the last time Li Ming returned to Earth, it was no longer the same as he remembered. Things and people have long changed. Under the night sky, Li Ming has been accompanying Gabby on the rooftop, enjoying the starry sky, discussing civilization, and talking about everything. Before arriving here, Li Ming even thought that he would be monitored, because the reason why he was brought here was entirely because the Andromeda Galaxy wanted to get the method to enter the GUI land from him. But unexpectedly, Li Ming has absolute freedom here, leaving and entering the residence, and walking around at will. There is no restriction at all. In the chat with Gabby, Li Ming's heart also had some envy and yearning. If he really traveled in space with a few friends, appreciated the universe, and discovered civilization, it must be a very interesting thing. But obviously, many times, there is still a certain gap between imagination and reality. This person named Gabby subverted Li Ming's past cognition. Although the two did not know each other, they could discuss their respective worldviews and cosmic views like confidants, like long-lost friends. But Li Ming just kept this feeling in his mind, and did not put it in his heart. At this moment, in the headquarters base of the Andromeda Galaxy, Tyson was still standing on the previous building, looking into the distance with his eyes, his face calm and cold, quietly looking into the distance. A few seconds later, a figure shuttled and jumped in the building area, and came to Tyson's side in a few flashes. Tyson did not move, his eyes continued to look into the distance, and said, "Have you figured it out?" The person who came was Zuan Fang. After nodding slightly, he replied, "Someone has kidnapped Bendine and Kori from the Triangulum Galaxy. This person is also very likely to have mastered the method to enter the GUI land, and is now arranged in the frontier base." Tyson nodded slightly, his eyes slowly closed, and said, "I will discuss with the commander the candidate to enter the GUI land. As for the person who knows the method to enter the GUI land, you will arrange it." Zuan Fang nodded vigorously and replied, "Yes." In the night sky, an arc-shaped spaceship appeared with a weak arc. After Zuan Fang stepped back 2 steps, his figure jumped into the air. He pointed at the void and the portal had emerged. Entering the spaceship through the portal, a white light flashed in the sky. It was as if a white sphere was suddenly pulled into a straight line of light, and the entire spaceship disappeared in the air with a bang. Tyson looked up, took a deep breath, frowned slightly, and whispered, "It's about to start again." Although the sky was full of darkness and howling hurricanes, it did not affect the flight of the spaceship at all. With a flash of light, the arc-shaped spaceship came to the sky above a mountain range. The spaceship did not continue to fly but stopped. Zuan Fang frowned slightly and looked at the operating table in front of him. A long barrier appeared on the screen. Seeing this barrier, Zuan Fang frowned slightly, his eyes were focused, and he looked at the front of the spaceship. In the void, a tall and burly figure appeared in front of the barrier in the distance. This person was tall and burly, holding a big knife, and his whole body was covered with light blue armor, as if he was wearing a layer of ice armor. While walking, a slight breath continued to rise from the surface of his body. It was like an icy armor releasing icy breath. As soon as he saw this person, Zuan Fang's eyes widened a little, his mouth slightly opened, his face looked extremely ugly, and he whispered softly, "The strongest existence in the second interval, 1.6 level civilization, ice breath Huanayu." Just as Zuan Fang said, the person who came was Binxi Huanayu, the strongest war god in the Triangulum Galaxy. From now on, no one can pass through here. Huanayu stood in the air and said coldly, and waved the big knife in his hand while speaking. The momentum was like an iceberg blocking in front of him, and his words were full of icy breath. Fang's spaceship naturally did not dare to move forward easily and could only retreat little by little when looking at Yu. But Fang's brain was already thinking quickly, and he thought to himself, the road to the frontier base was blocked to prevent people from approaching Gui land. Or, for that base. After thinking of these 2 points, Fang's eyes suddenly widened a little, and a new idea burst out in his mind. His sharp eyes looked at Yu again, and whispered seriously, could it be they are doing this for Li Ming? The more he thought about this, the uglier Fang's face became. He continued to retreat the spacecraft, and whispered, we must report this to Master Tizen. As soon as he said this, the entire spacecraft suddenly hummed lightly, and the surface of the spacecraft began to condense. Layers of frost formed on the spacecraft. The low temperature cold air even penetrated the surface of the spacecraft and headed towards the interior of the spacecraft. Fang had already noticed this through the operating console, but before he could do anything, a chill had already formed in the main cabin. The light blue chill spun and twisted, and finally turned into the appearance of Yu. Fang only felt a chill from behind him. His expression changed slightly, but his body did not move. His eyes moved to the corners of his eyes, as if he was looking behind him. I have no desire to kill people during non-wartime, but you may need to stay here for a while. As he spoke, Yu approached Fang step by step. With each step, the icy air spread from the soles of his feet, freezing the ground and the surrounding area. He stopped only when he came behind Fang. Yu gently raised his right hand and placed it on Fang's shoulder. Fang blinked slightly, glanced at the other's right hand, and still said nothing. At this time, the night sky had gradually faded, and the light rose from the horizon of the planet. The night had retreated, and the day was coming. 4 figures had quietly arrived near a base. This base is the frontier base of the Andromeda Galaxy, where Li Ming is located. Xiang Fei, wearing red armor, stood on a high rock, looking down with his eyes, and whispered, Zanzun, I can start here. The alien named Zanzun was on another rock at this time. His right hand stroked his back, and a long sharp blade appeared in his hand. This long blade was like an ancient spear, the whole silver, and there were arcs jumping on the surface. He held the weapon tightly with his right hand and whispered, let's start. As soon as the voice fell, Xiang Fei slowly took a deep breath. As he continued to inhale, his body gradually expanded, like a balloon that was constantly inflated. After a few seconds, Xiang Fei suddenly opened his mouth and blew at the base. In an instant, the wind wrinkled up. It seemed that Xiang Fei's mouth was just a gust of air, but the gas was mixed with transparent wind blades. Any object was directly cut in the place where it passed. From a distance, this hurricane directly blew away the buildings below. The wind blade cut the buildings into pieces, and then the hurricane blew away the pieces. In a blink of an eye, a large area of the entire construction area was razed to the ground, and many low-level soldiers died under the wind blade. The dawn sky was slightly bright, and this sudden hurricane sounded the battle alarm of the base. The originally relaxed scene was suddenly lost, and a sense of tension in war immediately filled everyone's heart. Li Ming turned his straight body and immediately looked in the direction of the hurricane. His eyes turned again, and looked in the direction of the hurricane. Xiang Fei's figure had already entered Li Ming's field of vision. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.